radio for the masses.
Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army.
If the game is rigged, change the game. Game changer.
I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world.
This is Fade to Black with your host, Jimmy Church, on the Game Changer Radio Network and KGRA, the Global Radio Alliance.
I need your help to get to the year 1985.
You're listening to Fade to Black with Jimmy Church on the Game Changer Network.
Good evening. Fade to Black. Bespoke Radio. For the masses. Yeah. How you doing? How you doing? Today is Wednesday, June 17th, 2020. 169 days into the new year. Just 197 days left. We are live from a bunker somewhere in the middle of beautiful downtown Burbank, California. And I would like to welcome everybody listening all around the world, all across the United States. Hither and thither, to and fro, back and forth, up and down, east and west, north and south, far and near. This is Fade to Black for KJCR, the Game Changer Network, and KGRA, the Planet. I am your host, Jimmy Church. What is cracking, everybody? How you doing? Third Stone Studios in Twitter with the raft crashing on the beach. That's a good one, man. That's a good one. You want to check out the GIFs that the Fadernauts post at the beginning of every show. And they're good stuff too, man. I'm scrolling through them right now. Go to hashtag F2B on Twitter. Hashtag F2B is the sandbox. It's where the Fadernauts hang out every single night. Follow me on Twitter at JChurchRadio. Get your evening started there, okay? Tonight, very special guest, Dr. Dean Radin. And he is going to be here because we need Dr. Dean. Tonight, it is going to be a conversation about our mind, our brain, consciousness, entanglement, us. That's right. It's going to be a great conversation. I need Dr. Dean. Dr. Dean Radin is here with us. And tomorrow night is another Fader night, and I need that too. Oh, man. Tomorrow night, another Fader night with open lines all night long. I just mentioned, follow me on Twitter at JChurchRadio. Get it done right there. If you want to hang out with us during the show, it's a real-time show. It's a live show, broadcast every night. Twitter, hashtag F2B. That's the sandbox. Everybody is over on YouTube right now, going crazy. You can join over there. You can join on my personal Twitter page where we are broadcasting live. Join the conversation there. You can go over to Spreaker, and we have a chat room there. You can go to KGRA The Planet. We have a chat room there. And, of course, everything is going on right now as I speak over on Facebook. Okay, so plenty of places to go and hang out live during the show. Okay, hashtag F2BQ, hashtag F2BQ on Twitter is Fade to Black Questions. If you have a question, post it there, hashtag F2BQ. If you got a comment, you want to chat, you want to hang out, hashtag F2B. Two different hashtags for me. Hashtag F2BQ for questions and comments. For myself or Dr. Dean Radin tonight. And, of course, you can always, there's a thing called email. I know you probably never heard of it, but email is something else you can use. Jimmy at jimmychurchradio.com. And I do check my email throughout the show to see if anybody's got anything interesting to say there. Okay? All right. Get your immune system boosted. Now, I want you to go to getthetea.com. There's a thing out there called coronavirus. You need to make sure you are topped off. Get yourself some Allison. I have grown, what's the word? A love affair for red cider vinegar. And those capsules from getthetea.com, that's a game changer. That's a life-changing thing right there. Yep, red vinegar capsules. Go and get yours over at getthetea.com, and all orders over $50 get you free shipping when you use the promo code FADER, F-A-D-E-R. All of our sponsors here on Fade to Black, we have banners, we have links over at jimmychurchradio.com, and all the promo codes that you need to use are in those banners. So help support the show. Go click like ForbiddenKnowledge.tv, Billy Carson's new internet TV network. There's a banner there. Head over, get registered, 3-day free trial membership. It's got over 1,000 shows, episodes, presentations, seminars, knowledge right there, ForbiddenKnowledge.tv. And, of course, River Moon Coffee. You guys watch, because we have to start the video feed a little early. You can see what I do here in the studio right before the show. It's this. Drink lots of coffee. Yeah. We're going to be talking about consciousness and the mind tonight with Dr. Dean Radin. And there's something that happens with me when I smell and drink coffee. I become alert, focused. My body knows what's happening. That River Moon coffee is coming into the system, and it rewards me with clear thought and happiness. Oh, man, that's an addiction right there. River Moon Coffee. Promo codes that you need are right there, either for Amazon and their Amazon store, or, of course, rivermooncoffee.com. It is the best coffee in the world. Let's get to the breaking news. Another crazy day on this planet. And check this out. Hot on the Heels. Remember that song by Keel? Right? Yngwie Malmsteen, Hot on Your Heels. Remember that? Yeah, Rick Fox on bass. Yeah, that was a good band. Ron Keel. That was a good band. It's a good band. Anyway, hot on the heels of 36 communicating ET species in our Milky Way, which came out 2 days ago. Hot on the heels of that is this. Using a groundbreaking new model, scientists have now calculated that there may be up to 6 billion Earth-like planets in the Milky Way galaxy. Every day we've got some kind of news like this. So far, we have confirmed the existence of 4,164 exoplanets, with another 4,374 waiting in the wings to be confirmed, closing in on 10,000 exoplanets. At present time, there are 500 billion stars in the Milky Way. Talked about it this week. Roughly 7% of which are similar in composition and size to our sun. These are known as G-type main sequence stars. Now, Michelle Kunimoto from the University of British Columbia, UBC, in Canada, an expert in exoplanets, applied a technique known as forward modeling to a database of 200,000 stars studied by the Kepler Planet Hunter between 2009 and 2018. She did this to see how many potential new Earths could be out there orbiting around these stars. Kunimoto used the exoplanet numbers, star compositions, and the total of stars in our Milky Way with forward modeling, and came up with the number 6 billion Earth-like planets. 6 billion. Goes right back to what I said on Monday. That number 36 is low. All right. It happened earlier today. Fulton County District Attorney Paul Howard announced 11 charges against the former Atlanta officer who shot and killed 27-year-old Rashard Brooks, including felony murder. Officer Garrett Rolfe was fired after footage showing him shooting at Brooks multiple times from the back as Brooks fled. If found guilty of felony murder, Rolfe faces life in prison without parole or the death penalty. A second officer on the scene, Devin Brosnan, is on administrative duty and also faces 3 charges, including aggravated assault. Howard also announced today, the DA, that Brosnan will be a witness for the state, but later, Don Samuel, one of the attorneys for Officer Devin Brosnan, said that his client had not agreed to testify. I watched the entire presentation today live. I saw the video, I saw the photographs, and it was traumatic. It was traumatic. More on this in just a bit. The StarWorks UFOs and Artificial Intelligence Conference in Laughlin, Nevada, happening on November 5th through the 8th, is happening. I want you to get your tickets and info. Go to StarWorksUSA.com. I'm going to be there. Grant Cameron's going to be there. James Fox is going to be there. We're going to do 2 nights, 2 exclusive nights, Fade to Black Sky Watches on Thursday the 5th and Friday the 6th. All right, get your tickets and info. It's going to be great. James Fox is going to show and premiere his movie, The Phenomenon. It's going to be awesome. I want all of you to be there. I'm going to be there. Rita's going to be there. Fade to Black crew is going to be there. All those Fade to Black shirts are going to be running around and Fade to Black hats. It's going to be awesome. I need to get out of the house. So do you. StarWorksUSA.com. Also, the Disclosure Fest is happening October 10th, 2020, right here in Los Angeles at the historic Los Angeles Park in downtown L.A. It's a one-day event. It is free. I'm going to be hosting. I'm going to be speaking. I'm going to celebrate my birthday. That is my birthday, October 10th. Come and hang out with us, disclosurefest.org. For all of your information, you can get registered. It's a free event, one day, 20,000 people right here in downtown Los Angeles. All right, disclosurefest.org. Happy birthday to today, Barry Manilow. That's right, I said it. Barry Manilow, my heavy metal self, just said happy birthday to Barry Manilow. Today, 77 years old. Also today, Hanoi Rocks frontman Michael Monroe. Today, 58. Hanoi Rocks, man, that 1984, 1985 Hanoi Rocks was the real deal. It was a good band. Too short. Happy birthday, Michael Monroe. On this day in history, OTD 1994. Are you ready? It happened. Live on television, too. O.J. Simpson and Al Cowlings lead L.A. police on a 35-mile-per-hour chase up the 405 freeway to Simpson's home in Brentwood. Live on TV. It was just, what was funny? I got to move on. I don't want to spend a lot of time on this. But I watched it going down from my place there in Sherman Oaks and went, man, it's coming up they're coming up, they're passing LAX. So I went out, jumped in my car and went over to the overpass of the 405 freeway of Sherman Oaks. And when I got there, there was probably 150 people all hanging out on the overpass with cameras, no cell phones, and waiting. But he turned off on the exit in front of us, Sunset Boulevard, and went up into Brentwood. But wow, that was crazy. Live on TV. Fader fact: Umarells. That's Umarells. It's actually Umarell, but the plural version is Umarells. Is a term in Italy used to describe old men who watch over construction sites. A building is being built, right? A construction site, chain link fence around it, with their hands behind their backs, offering unwanted advice. It's a real thing. Umarells. There's your Fader fact. Tonight, very special guest, Dean Radin, is here. We're going to have a conversation about us, our mind, our brain, and consciousness. Tomorrow night, Fader Night. Open lines all night long. Now, I really need this River Moon coffee. Hang on for a second. Yep, the most unprofessional thing you can do in broadcasting. Drink coffee into a live mic. It makes you want some, doesn't it? Man, River Moon Coffee. Click on the banners over at jimmychurchradio.com. All right, it is the best coffee in the world. Stand by it. Fade to Black blend and the Game Changer blend. All right. Okay, let's talk. Today, the country, and indeed the world, faced more heaviness with the announcement from the Atlanta DA live on television, charges being brought for 2 ex-Atlanta police officers for the death of Rayshard Brooks. He also, the DA, revealed how those officers treated Rayshard before and after the shooting. Rayshard's killing this past Friday night came amid nationwide protests calling for the end of racism and police violence against black people, which are happening because of the murder of George Floyd. And all of this is happening during the coronavirus pandemic and its lockdown and its crushing of the world economy. And it's an election year. There is more drama right now as I speak to you, more drama, real trauma, than at any point in history. It is coming at us from every direction. It's jobs, it's industry, it's our children, schools, racism, politics, law enforcement, and it has spread around the world. This pressure that nobody can escape will continue to have an effect on all of us. It's going to have an effect in ways that we just can't imagine. This program, Fade to Black, has been an escape. It's been a safe place of refuge where you can come and hang out each night and hopefully not have to think about what is going on right now outside of your homes. In some ways, it seems like the right thing to do to make this a safe place. But it is also ignoring the reality that we find ourselves in with no end in sight. And I say this because I'm in the same position as all of you. I'm not immune to anything. The emotions that I felt today after the Atlanta news conference just wore me down. Sure, I was angry. I still am. But there is this feeling of being pushed down. It's like I need a timeout. I'm starting to feel really exhausted. Now, normally, I can just put on some music, get my brain to somewhere else. And I did that today. I did that today with Triumph at the 1983 US Festival. That's Triumph, the band. Rick Emmett, Gilmore playing the world's largest drum set. Triumph at the 1983 US Festival. And I posted it over on Facebook. And I did this in an effort to get all of you away from the day's bad news. And for me, it worked for a few minutes. But then the world checked back in. It reminded me of where we really are. The world said, "No, man, Triumph ain't going to do it." Because we, the world, have gone nuts. The whole planet. This is where conscious and consciousness comes into the conversation. The mind. The brain. Who controls what? In that I mean, are we telling our brains what to do, or do we react to what our brain and mind are doing first? Why are we, as a planet, doing and saying the things we are right now? This is all happening worldwide. People are feeling the same stuff. It's certainly not being blocked by languages or oceans. So what is causing it? Is there something being triggered that is much deeper than we know or understand? I'll say this. We talk about the mass media and their ability to deliberately cause issues through fear and panic. And this is certainly the case right now. But they didn't expect this kind of worldwide response. It is now clearly out of their control. It's also out of the government's control. Right now, there is nothing that can be done. And we all know it. You see, the puppet masters thought they had everything managed. Every move by the board of directors that has been made over the last 6 months, well, the opposite reaction has happened. They truly do not understand the human mind. In fact, nobody does. With all of the conspiracy talk over the years about a new world order and the control of everything by just a few, although it may be real, and it probably is, those few who have chosen to manipulate the masses through the media and the internet are finding out right now that the control is with the masses. The media and the internet have turned on them. Things have ignited. Things have ignited something deep down, something so inside the minds of individuals around the world that nobody understands. Not even the elite who thought they could control the future. Now, there is a lot of research going on about our brains, our mind, and consciousness. And the more that this work continues, the more we do not know. The brain is a complete unknown. You see, with the elites, that is a very dangerous world. You can't just lock things down. You can't ruin lives and our future and then start killing black men in the streets for the world to see. There was no game planned. There was no end game. The elite who own the banks, the media, the armies have no idea what they are doing or what they have caused. And just saying all of this right now scares the crap out of me because it is real. They are not as smart as we thought they were. And that ultimately will be the real issue. There is not some crazy conspiracy show going on right now, like from years past, or the reading of George Orwell's 1984. No, this is real. This is not fiction. Now, eventually, the smoke will clear. We will come out of the other side of this never-ending nightmare that we find ourselves in. You see, I'm struggling with my thoughts, just like all of you. I'm not any different. I'm not a superhero. And together with this show and guests like Dr. Dean Radin, we'll start to figure out a path forward. Fade to Black is not here to try and solve the world's problems. Far from it, I'm not that smart. But we will look into how our minds work. What is consciousness? And why we do what we do. It's playing that small part that will, in the end, will start to create a better place and a future that we can all be proud of. You see, earlier today, it was Triumph at the US Festival. That's right. And tonight, it's with Dean Radin and a conversation about our mind, brain, and consciousness. Tomorrow, it will be with another Fader night and open lines all night long. That's what we do. This will continue to be our safe place. All right? Are we all on the same page? a lot of drama. It's a lot of trauma. I get it. I'm just like you. And you need to understand that. Don't be surprised. Don't be surprised. You tune in to Fade to Black one night and you find out that I'm broadcasting from a tent on the top of a mountain in Appalachia. I'm with all of you, okay? And I'm exhausted. I'm tired. I've got to figure out why I feel the way that I do. And if I do it, you'll do it, and we'll all do it together. Okay? Are we cool? All right. I'm going to get out of here because when I come back, we'll be joined by Dr. Dean Radin. This is Fade to Black. I am your host, Jimmy Church, on the Game Changer Network and KGRA, The Planet. All right, follow me on Twitter at JChurchRadio. Hashtag F2B is the sandbox. Hashtag F2BQ is Fade to Black questions. Email is Jimmy at jimmychurchradio.com. I'll be right back after this short break. Stay with us.
This is Nicole Church, daughter of you-know-who, and you're listening to Fade to Black on jimmychurchradio.com and the Game Changer Network.
You're listening to Jimmy Church, Fade to Black.
Fade to Black will now pause for alien identification.
The station that talks the net. KGRA Radio. When you take the beans from Central America with dashes of Indonesian and African mixed in and then roast it to the dark side of Fade to Black, you create the ultimate brew of fringe. Introducing the Fade to Black blend from River Moon Coffee. Yes, River Moon's darkest customized roast was created for the love of Fade to Black. The alchemy of masterful roasting and smoking the beans is in every sip of this full-bodied, dark Java. I need my coffee dark, deep, with distinct bittersweet chocolate highlights, just like the bunker. Leaning further into the darkness of the roast is Fade to Black blend from River Moon Coffee. Just click on the banner at jimmychurchradio.com and use the promo code F2BBLEND for 15% off of your order today. Go Beckley Teppy. This is Jimmy Church of Fade to Black, and you can get our podcast for just $2 per month. All you have to do is click on the podcast banner over at jimmychurchradio.com.
OMG! People are jumping on board to the Life Change Tea Regiment. Brew, steep, and drink for a gentle, taste-great cleanse. It's changing how they feel. See what everybody's talking about. Log on to getthetea.com. That's getthetea.com. Life Change Tea aids in digestive slowdown and helps people get moving down a healthy path. We won't make claims. We'll just let you decide. Experience is much better than a commercial anyway. If you want results, log on to getthetea.com and purchase your super strength cleansing tea. You won't be disappointed. And if you're looking for some mind-body suggestions, go to YouTube and punch in the search bar Health Matters Now. That's Health Matters Now. Put power into your health now. So, getthetea.com. That's getthetea.com for super strength tea. And YouTube, Health Matters Now. That's Health Matters Now for valuable suggestions. Getthetea.com. The tea that makes you go.
9 out of 10 geneticists agree.
Fade to Black is not your father's radio show on the Game Changer Radio Network and KGRA, The Planet.
Hi, this is Rob Reiner from Anvil, and you're listening to JimmyChurchRadio.com.
What's up? I'm Chris. What up? This is Kyle Massey, and you're listening to Jimmy Church Radio.
Welcome back, Fade to Black. I am your host, Jimmy Church. Tonight, Dean Radin is here. Tomorrow night's Fader Night, open lines all night long. But tonight, our guest is Dr. Dean Radin. We're going to discuss the mind, the brain, the latest research into consciousness, and how hard science is finally trying to figure out what is really going on. Dean Radin, Ph.D., is a chief scientist at the Institute of Noetic Sciences, otherwise known as IONS. And before joining the research staff at IONS back in 2001, he held appointments at AT&T Bell Labs. So did I. Interesting. He's a musician. So am I. But he went to Princeton. He was at the University of Edinburgh. I was not. And, of course, SRI International. He's an author or co-author of over 250 technical and popular articles, 36 book chapters, 3 books, including the award-winning The Conscious Universe, Entangled Minds, and the 2014 Silver Nautilus Book Award winner, SUPERNORMAL, and that was also released in 2013. Now, the website is noetic.org. All the links for Dean are over at jimmychurchradio.com. I would like to welcome back to Fade to Black, Dr. Dean Radin. Dr. Dean, good evening. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Are you ready to, start playing your banjo and going, the world has gone crazy?
One of these days, yes.
Yes. And this is, I kind of want to start out here because... in a second, I want to get to some definitions because we're going to be talking about a lot of different things tonight, and I want to get to that. But before I do, with the way the world is right now, and everybody on the planet, in one way or another, everybody is affected somewhat. How do you, with your knowledge of how consciousness and the mind works, how do you stay out in front of it and keep your sanity and keep your feet on the ground? What do you do?
Well, for one thing, I meditate twice a day. I exercise. I'm trying not to pay as much attention to the news as I had been before, although that's difficult because it's kind of compelling. And I think it's because consciousness is part of my research focus, I'm working along with others on ways of measuring physical effects on the world as a result of collective consciousness. So it's part of my job to do this, and just personally then I work to keep myself calm. Is
because your work is this, right now you're seeing collective consciousness in action, probably in a way that you could have never imagined, right? Is this like the ultimate research study for you to see this going on?
Well, not exactly. I mean, it is, at least as far as the pandemic goes, scientists have been talking about this for decades. We knew this was going to happen. So it wasn't a question of if, it was only a question of when. In fact, in 2018, I was working on a project with Merck Pharmaceutical in Germany, and the topic of the project was all about how do we stop pandemics, because they're primarily distributed now by airplanes. So we came up with an idea that wouldn't have cost very much. It would require a way of testing on the airplane itself to see if somebody was infected. Technically, we could have done it, but it was a political problem because you'd have to get all the airlines in the world to agree to take on this new technology. And of course, you can't get more than 2 people to agree on anything, so that wasn't going to work very well. So lots of projects around the world have been trying to figure out how do we detect and how do we stop the very fast spread of pandemics, because it's not true now, but before the pandemic, there were at any given time around 2 million people in the air and 200,000 airplanes. And so it's very easy to see how something that starts on the other side of the planet can infect the rest of the world in a matter of a month. And that's what happened.
And when you look at something like that from a scientific standpoint and trying to establish ideas and ways to deal with it in the future, there's another part of this where you must have thought about how the world would react if they were presented with real world not only panic, but a situation that is going to cause people to not ignore it, right? And where it's always happening somewhere else, right? It's not your issue. When it becomes your issue and your neighbor's issue, the town's issue, the cities, the states, the countries, and then the world, well, now everybody is going to have a conscious connection, right? Did you think about that and how the world would react?
Right. So everyone is interconnected now from a very conventional perspective through the media. So media is 24/7, connects everybody, especially now that we have smartphones where we can listen to news constantly everywhere and send out alerts constantly. So if something happens in the world that affects one area of the world in a negative way, typically, like a giant earthquake or Ebola currently in Africa, if we're paying attention, we are part of that. I mean, it's infectious in terms not only of a virus, but our way of thinking about it. So from that very conventional way, we are all interconnected. But generally what I study are other more subtle ways in which we're interconnected, which has to do with our definitions of what we think consciousness is and mind and the relationship with the brain and all of that. So the very topics that you're talking about today.
The phases of things that we're all very aware of now on this timeline over the last 5 or 6 months was pretty amazing, because in the beginning, it seemed that everybody was okay with protecting the planet and protecting their friends and family with going into a lockdown. Some kind of sheltered existence, don't know how long it's going to last, but it seemed that everything else at that time, Doctor, was put on the back burner. And I'm talking about crime, war, right? The bad parts of the world weren't in the news. Certainly we had pandemic in the news, but the other stuff that we were traditionally fed seemed to have disappeared. And that there was a kindness, a gentleness of the world where it seemed like we were at some kind of paradigm shift. And that was a good thing. But now, at the end of 3 or 4 months of being at home, is certainly going to have its negative consequences too. And it seems like we're seeing that start to play out. Did the powers, the heads of state and so forth around the world, did they take that into consideration, that what the effects would be consciously on 7 billion people on the planet and affecting their futures?
Oh, I'm sure that they did. I mean, the scenarios that were played out as beforehand, including several months in the U.S., several months before the pandemic hit, there were already these simulations that were going on, and what do we do? How do we act? What are the consequences of it? So all of that has been studied to a great extent in most countries in the world. The problem is, of course, that once you're actually no longer in a simulation and you're in the real thing, especially when there are political considerations that overtake medical considerations, which happens also in many countries, then it becomes much more complicated. So it's completely true that you can, and in some cases absolutely need to lock people down for the sake of everyone's health, but there's a gigantic economic consequence to that. And also, just from a purely psychological perspective, that people begin to go crazy after a while, after being quarantined for a long time. If you're an introvert like me, it makes no difference at all. I like being home. Like I don't want to go out. So it really doesn't matter for me, but a lot of people are not introverts, and they need human connection with others. And if they don't get that, they start to go a little crazy. So it's a long lockdown starts to become more and more like a powder keg that's ready to explode. So the combination of that combined with the economic need to get people back to work, you can see how the tension is playing out now in the United States, where some people have just given up on masks and they're giving up on social distancing. They're saying, I can't stand it anymore. So this, of course, is a problem.
And then you combine that. This is what I find really interesting. Then we'll get into some definitions here. You combine that with all of the other drama, harsh, heavy news, and of course, the elephant in the room is racism. And that in an election year and all of the other politics and the things that are playing out, law enforcement, our kids being home from schools, you don't know if you have a job or a future, and bills, and everything is coming down on everyone all at the same time. What effect? Obviously, we're seeing some of the things happen with protest, but there are some longer-term effects from all of this too as well. Do you think that the collective consciousness will tap out? Exhaustion's going to come in, and people are just not going to be able to take the news anymore.
Well, we're in the midst now of creating what amounts to a societal post-traumatic stress disorder,
right?
A gigantic PTSD. How it plays out, we don't know, because there have been few times in history where something of this magnitude has shut down the entire globe. So we'll have to be paying attention and watch how it plays out. But I do know that a lot of my colleagues who are clinical psychologists, they're very concerned about what's going to happen over the next year or so, because it's going to take a while before fear about the COVID virus begins to settle down after we have vaccines. And of course, the problem now with we all want a vaccine, and there's this huge acceleration, this warp speed creation of a vaccine, which in itself could be extremely dangerous, because a vaccine you hope will do what it does and be safe. But if you do it too quickly, this is why the clinical trials are so important, it could have side effects, and the side effects can end up being worse than the thing itself. So we're in a strange time, and most people in living memory have never been in a time like this at all anywhere. So we're learning as we go.
Let's go through some definitions, and we'll start with the simple stuff. Conscience. What is that?
Do you mean consciousness, or do you mean conscience?
Yeah, we're going to do consciousness next. There's a method to my madness.
Yeah. So as it turns out, I have a lot of French colleagues, and in French, there's no difference between conscious and consciousness. And so you have to be clearer about how you're describing what you're talking about. So when I tell people from France I'm doing consciousness studies, they give a puzzled look and they say, "But conscious? I mean, conscience?" They don't get it. So I would say that conscience is, at least in English, would mean that we get a sense of something that we're doing, and we have an emotional reaction to it, and we evaluate the morality and ethics of whatever our actions are. That is when we have a conscience about something, or memory of something that we pay attention to.
Consciousness.
Consciousness, I would say, is, in its simplest form, is awareness. It's the subjective sense of having experience. Awareness.
Very interesting. Yeah, and you know what? I very rarely agree with the French. Okay, now the mind.
The mind is used for things like cognition, our ability to do analytical work, perception, our ability to see and hear, and so on, sensation, which comes before just being aware of the senses, and memory. So mind is all of those things wrapped into one, and it's when we refer to me or I, that's generally what people think of as mind. It's the perception, awareness, and memory all linked together.
Now, we all know that the brain is, a few pounds of goo inside of our skulls. But for you, what would be the definition of the brain?
Oh, yeah, it's 3 pounds of goo that's inside your skull.
And we'll leave it at that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very specialized type of goo. and we've learned quite a bit about it. It's an organ. It's one of the organs of the body. There are those who think, by the way, that many of the same neurons in the brain are in your gut, and some of them are in your heart. In fact, it's all throughout your body. You can find astrocytes and other kinds of brain cells. It's just that the highest density of them are inside your head, and that's the organ that we call the brain.
Now, what comes first? Consciousness or the brain?
That depends on who you're talking to.
Right.
And it also depends on your worldview, your scientific worldview, which means the theories and models that you use to describe reality. So most people who go through scientific training learn about this doctrine or philosophical stance of materialism, in which everything is made up of matter and energy, literally everything. And from that stance, the brain is a physical object made up of matter and energy, and there is nothing else, in which case consciousness is emerging out of the activity of the brain. This is today's dogma within the neurosciences. This is either taught explicitly in the way that I just said, that consciousness emerges out of brain activity, or implicitly, in which there are phrases like Francis Crick used to say, that you, all of your dreams and knowledge and memory and everything that you imagine about yourself is actually an illusion that's being created by the brain. It's a generation of the brain, the activity of the brain. In which case, from that perspective, which is the mainstream scientific perspective, our sense of self is an illusion, which gives rise to some philosophers like Daniel Dennett, who says that ultimately we're really like zombies. We give the appearance of being aware and alive.
And in control.
And in control to some degree.
Right.
Not all that much.
Right.
But that we're zombies because you don't really have consciousness. In fact, there really isn't even anything that is consciousness. It's an illusion. Of course, and this also is a dogma. There are many neuroscientists who accept that idea. Fortunately, not so many today, but 30 years ago, that was the prevailing dogma. So when I used to hear this when I was going through graduate school, and people would basically say that if you have a fancy enough computer, you could make it conscious. It would be just as conscious as you are, because it's consciousness arising out of a complex system. In which case our consciousness is kind of an illusion, because when I write a software program on a computer, I don't get the sense that it's actually aware. I can simulate the awareness, but it's not really aware, in which case maybe I'm not really aware either. I'm simulating it. But then I always thought, well, then I don't feel like I'm a simulation. I feel like I'm aware. And a philosopher would just dismiss that and say, well, your feelings don't matter.
Yeah,
so all of that.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
So all of that comes out of this doctrine of materialism, where you can make a robot like Data on Star Trek. That android is a conscious being because of this idea that material objects can give rise to consciousness in some way. The problem is that nobody has any idea how that could happen, because if you start with matter and energy and you assume that they don't have self-awareness, that it somehow arises out of it, well, how can something that doesn't have awareness suddenly gain it? Awareness is not a physical thing. It's subjective. It's inside somehow. It's inside physics. So the other approach then, the other worldview, the flip side of materialism is called idealism. And this is a long-held philosophical position. In fact, most of the founders of quantum mechanics held an idealist view of reality.
Right. And
so that view says it is not that matter and energy are fundamental, but rather it's consciousness that is fundamental. And when you think about this, it's kind of radical, especially if you go through the standard academic training. But when you think about it, the only thing you will ever actually know personally and intimately is things that you're aware of, almost by definition. If you're not aware of something, you can't know it. So from that perspective, everything that you think you know about the nature of the world, everything about reality, all of our models, everything is an inference. You're constructing it as an inference, but the only thing you could actually know directly is your awareness. So you can see then that these were polar opposites. On the one side, you have materialism, where everything's made out of matter and energy, and there's no consciousness. On the other side, all there is consciousness, and matter and energy are emerging somehow out of this primordial awareness that somehow permeates everything in the universe.
There's a problem with both sides, too, as well, and not to go with something very simplistic and make it trivial, which would be, suggesting, the chicken or the egg, right? What came first? But that is certainly the case here with both sides of this discussion, because something has to happen first. You can't have the experience or the memory for the brain to be making decisions without the brain, you know what I mean? And that's on one side. And it's the same thing on the consciousness side, where you can't have consciousness be everything if there is no consciousness there at the start of the development of the brain. And at what point do those particles that make up us go from being just particles to something that does contain consciousness? And it's the same argument on both sides. It's a genuine conundrum almost.
Right. And so this is why there are two little twists on on materialism versus idealism. One is neutral monism,
right,
which basically says that mind and matter are two sides of the same coin. So when you look at the heads or tails on a coin, they're not the same thing, but they're very, very tightly correlated with each other. And you can't have one without the other. They really are. They're linked together in a very tight way. The other solution, which is becoming even more popular now and within the scientific community, is panpsychism. So panpsychism says that ultimately all forms of matter and energy have an inherent form of consciousness, even all the way down to an electron or down to a quark and below. So that in one stroke then, that philosophical stance pretty much solves the problem, the conundrum between materialism and idealism. It says everything actually is conscious or has consciousness, but there also is a physical world. That's not an illusion out there. It is somehow linked in a fundamental way with awareness. So, as I said, panpsychism has been around a long time in a philosophical sense, but within science, I would say only in the past 10 or 15 years, you find more and more scientists, even thought leaders within different disciplines in science, who are beginning to say, yeah, you know what, that kind of makes sense. That would solve a lot of problems that we can't solve within a purely materialistic perspective.
A consciousness unified field theorem, right? So to speak.
Except that it would have to include the physical world, matter and energy, in some fundamental way as well. And of course, going through an engineering and a scientific career, I completely accepted materialism as the way things work for many, many years, because I had no reason to not accept it. And in addition, the use of materialism as a doctrine has been extremely successful. And so you can't argue with success. I mean, we know a lot about all kinds of things now because we've used these assumptions of materialism, and it works. So it doesn't make any sense to throw it away. On the other hand, it doesn't explain consciousness very well, which, as I said, is the only thing that we actually know. So there's some kind of melding of the two together that I think it will be in our future. I think future academics will begin to embrace the idea of either panpsychism or neutral monism in a more fundamental way.
Now, when we look at this, we've got 2 minutes before the break. But when we look at this, it sounds like, and I need your help in understanding, are you suggesting that consciousness comes from chemistry, a chemical reaction, the assembly of the brain or matter, or does it exist independently outside of chemistry?
I'm saying, at least from my perspective, and I'm somewhere right in the middle of materialism versus idealism.
Right.
I would say that consciousness does not arise out of the activity of the brain, that it is already inherently there in the matter itself. That would be a panpsychist perspective or a neutral monism perspective. So mind and matter, or consciousness and matter, are two sides of the same coin.
Very interesting. Okay, so this is an extreme thought, and it's almost like a yes or no answer, too. You're saying that the particles and the matter on the moon, without any sentient beings being there, I'm just talking about the matter made up is also conscious, it just hasn't been assembled yet?
It has consciousness.
Yes.
Yes.
Wow, that's fascinating.
That's the implication, yes.
That is fascinating. I talked about Brian Greene last night. He made this statement, and it's shared by other physicists, but he made this statement that kind of stopped me in my tracks when he was asked, where does consciousness come from? And from a physics standpoint, are you guys pursuing the algorithms to figure out consciousness? He goes, actually, there's a little piece of consciousness in every single particle down to the smallest of matter. Mm-hmm. And it's when you assemble everything together that the consciousness is accumulated. And I was like, wow. Yep. Wow, that's just a heavy thought. But
that would have been extremely heretical to say 30 years ago.
Certainly, it's nearly heretical today. Yeah, absolutely. Let's take our break right here. Our guest tonight, Dr. Dean Radin. I am your host, Jimmy Church. Tonight, we're going to discuss it all. We're discussing the mind, your brain, the brain, and the latest research into consciousness and how hard science is finally trying to figure out what is really going on inside of that head of yours. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. This is Fade to Black. We'll be right back after this short break. Stay with us.
This is Fade to Black with Jimmy Church on the Game Changer Radio Network and KGRA, the Global Radio Alliance.
This is KGRA Digital Broadcasting Station, Salt Lake City, Utah, Van Buren, Arkansas.
Hello, my name is Billy Carson, and I'm a best-selling author and the founder of ForbiddenKnowledge.tv. Together with my team, we have built an all-new conscious streaming TV platform designed with every family member in mind. If you have ever wanted to travel the world and attend lectures and workshops from your favorite speakers but weren't able to, look no further. ForbiddenKnowledge.tv. There are dozens of workshops and lectures from speakers you know and love. We have also included amazing categories to assure that your consciousness is entertained and elevating on a daily basis. Amazing interviews, ancient history, ascension knowledge, wisdom teachings, documentaries, conspiracies, mysteries, health and fitness, conscious cooking, meditations, finance, yoga, and so much more. To start your free trial on any mobile device or computer, surf to ForbiddenKnowledge.tv. That's Forbidden Knowledge with the number 4, ForbiddenKnowledge.tv. Again, visit ForbiddenKnowledge.tv today.
Introducing the new Surfer Music app. Listen, Fadernauts, you know I love my music. This is my go-to for all things notes. The Surfer app is a brand new concept in music listening. Surfer is free, providing unlimited access to thousands of live streaming radio stations. Surfer is an exciting, interactive listening experience. Discovery and surprise are built right in. Surfer is your destination to discover and rediscover great live streaming music. It features high-quality audio streams, free access to music from thousands of live streaming radio stations, unlimited listening, unlimited skipping. You get a music visualizer, and you can also select your favorite channels. Get it at the Apple App Store or Google Play. Just search Surfer Music or click on the Surfer banner at jimmychurchradio.com. Go back, Lee Tappy.
Okay, nurse, let's get this man to the ER stat. Right away, doctor.
We see this every day. Heart attack or angina pain due to blocked and clogged arteries. Chelation can remove obstructions or blockages from arteries and help avoid painful and expensive surgery. Now there's Angioprim. It's a liquid oral chelation product that you take with juice. You start to feel the results fast. Angioprim increases blood flow all over the body, and that means more energy and strength to take on the day with less aches and pains. 60 years of research has gone into chelation, and Angioprim is the result. A safe and easy way to unblock your veins and arteries from buildup that slow circulation.
Paging Dr. Jones. Please report to the emergency room right away.
Log on now to angioprim.com. That's ANGIOPRIM.com. Or to speak with a trained consultant. Give Angioprim a call at 954-882-7221. That's 954-882-7221.
Hello, I'm Katie, and you're listening to my main man, Jimmy Church, on jimmychurchradio.com.
Hi, this is Ray Hobbs here, repping the planet, and you're listening to my good friend, Jimmy Church, Fade to Black, on the Game Changer Network and the KGRA digital broadcast station.
This is Toby Kebbell. You're listening to jimmychurchradio.com. Don't hurt me, Jimmy. I'm only little. Hey, I'm Adrian Grenier. And this is Ari Gold. We're the Honey Brothers. We're of the Honey Brothers. Hey, I'm Adrian Grenier. And I'm Ari Gold. We're the Honey Brothers. And you're listening to Jimmy Church. The Revolution.
This is Jimmy Church of Fade to Black, and you can become an official Fadernaut by just going to our membership section at jimmychurchradio.com.
Hello, this is Serena Wright Taylor from Conscious Life Expo, and you're listening to Fade to Black with Jimmy Church, who holds the Lucky Pony record for the best astrological chart since 1963. True story.
This is Micah Hanks of the Gralien Report, and you're listening to Jimmy Church on Fade to Black, across the globe on the Game Changer Radio Network and the one and only KGRA Radio, The Planet.
Welcome back, Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Tonight, Dr. Dean Radin is here. We are discussing the mind, your mind, the brain, and the latest research into consciousness. This is going to be a great conversation. I want everybody to just kick back. I'll give you a pop quiz tomorrow on Fader Night. We'll see how everybody gets through this, Doctor. But let's go here next. Do we control our brains, or do our brains control us and we are reacting to what the brain is telling us to do? What comes first?
They both come first. That's a chicken and egg question. The brain is constantly in activity. It is certainly correlated with consciousness, with awareness. But many of the aspects of what we think of as mind, the perception, sensations, memory, and all that, that's part of the brain. So you're not always aware of everything that's going on in the brain. That's what both neuroscience and psychotherapy discovered, that most of our activities are actually driven by unconscious and preconscious aspects of brain activity. If it wasn't for a number of anomalies that are not easily explained by a mechanistic or a materialistic perspective, there wouldn't be any there wouldn't be any need to question the idea that your entire mind and awareness were due to the activity of the brain. But there is a growing list, of things that the brain-centric idea of the mind just doesn't explain very well. And that's the area that I specialize in. And
when we come to, and I want to get to some entanglement aspects of society today too, as well. I'm very fascinated with this. But there's another side to what you just said, which is we may not be aware
it's almost free will, where we think that we're making a decision and we're doing it, but our brain that we are not aware of is actually making that decision for us. Right? Is that the right way to look at it?
Yes. So there's a lot that goes on in terms of your behavior in particular that is driven by unconscious activity, not necessarily of the brain, although it's going to be related to that, but unconscious portions of the mind.
Right.
And so one way that we know that this is happening is that everybody knows it's not really a great idea to smoke and drink and eat sugar. And yet we do it all the time. And so the body has a way, and the body and brain have a way of overriding what we know we shouldn't be doing. In my own case, I'm a fan of cookies. Mm-hmm. And so if there's a plate of cookies in front of me, I have to work really hard not to have one of those cookies. And I'll find myself, like I'll stare at with unbelief at one of my hands that is going over and picking up the cookie.
Sure.
And so part of me is thinking, what am I doing? I shouldn't do this. And then with even greater horror, I see the cookie now being picked up and approaching my mouth. All the time I'm protesting, and yet my body will override it. So take that as one simple example of many, many things that are going on all the time. And it leads to all kinds, typically, of not great things, overweight and lots of problems.
Well, the worst thing is putting the cookie down. That would be...
It takes such you're talking about free will.
Right.
So for free will can override these unconscious impulses, but it is not easy at all. So, yeah, occasionally the cookie gets put down, but then it might be substituted by something like a corn chip or some other delicious thing that you make an agreement with yourself that if I put this cookie away and I eat that corn chip, well, that doesn't have as much sugar in it, so I can make a deal with myself. And of course, that doesn't really work out very well at the end either, because you end up having both a cookie and a corn chip. But at least you try.
Yeah, well, and expanding on that, going into a real world situation, when we're talking about the media today, and it can be from suggestive advertising about cookies, right? It could be that. It could be the pandemic or racism or politics, where they are projecting these images on us and these thoughts, forcing our brains to react in a way that we don't understand as individuals necessarily, but the power that the media holds and wields today, I don't think that they fully understand the long-term effects of doing this on to society. And we're seeing that now with the craziness, aren't we?
Well, the whole point of advertising is to manipulate you. That's what it is. And so people in the PR world know very well how to manipulate people to buy things and to do things that they consciously may not want to do. That's what the profession is about. And there are a lot of people in the PR world now are looking at neuromarketing, where they're looking at how the brain responds, the brain and the body respond to different ways of portraying things. So when you see something typically 8 or 9 o'clock at night on television, you'll start seeing images of a really, really good-looking burger or some very delicious-looking thing. Well, that's a trigger. And you may or may not be hungry at that time. You probably will be made hungry as a result of looking at the delicious food, and it sinks in. It becomes almost like a hypnotic trigger that the next time that you go next to a fast food place, you're thinking, oh, yeah, I really wanted that. And it takes work to push against it. So, yeah. And the media, you're right, the media as well knows very well that negative news shows or items and breaking news and words like that push the body. It stimulates the body, and people kind of like that. We like to be stimulated. Most of the time, unfortunately, it's negative. Sometimes it's positive, like when the rocket took off with astronauts in it. That was pleasant, but that's the exception. Most of the time, it's negative things because they know that's what will draw people to watch the TV or listen to the news.
Are those same intellectuals using having these types of conversations when news is presented? Are they concerned about the emotional effects and trauma it may have?
Well, all I can say is I hope so. So I'm not part of that domain. I don't work in the PR business, and I don't know how the editorials and the decisions are made, especially in TV media rooms. But I hope someone's paying attention. I mean, because depending on the political stripe and all the rest, there are decisions constantly being made, and how do we push people to want to watch more of this? And so I know in my own self that I listen to CNN. I don't watch it very much because I'm doing other things, but I have it on kind of in the background. Mm-hmm. Because part of me wants to know, wants to be plugged into that worldwide media thing happening. And I also know that as a result of listening to that particular network, as compared to Fox or some other network, that I'm being biased. I mean, it's pushing a certain narrative. That's how the news media work today. And it makes me nostalgic for someone like Walter Cronkite.
Sure.
So we don't have personalities now that we feel that we can trust implicitly, because everything seems to have a spin to it now, and that's unfortunate.
And we were discussing conscience versus consciousness earlier. Do you think that the media, all of it, by the way, I'm not going to focus on one network, everybody's culpable these days, but do you think that they, as a collective, have a conscience and will at some point realize that they need to pull back the reins a little bit and they can help the situation instead of throwing fuel on the fire?
Well, again, I hope so, except that it's profitable.
Right.
And unfortunately, in capitalistic societies like the United States, profit is king. Everything depends on profit. This is one of the reasons why you don't hear about it too much right now. But our healthcare system is based on profit. That means that the organism, if you think of it as the hospital system, is designed to suck as much money out of you as possible. And that's why we get these ridiculous bills, $500,000 for curing a toenail, that kind of nonsense. It's because it's based on profit. And so unless we're talking about a societal change where we want to promote health, like in the old days, some countries, you would pay the doctor only when you would actually pay the doctor a small amount all the time. And then if you had a problem, you wouldn't pay any more because you've been supporting that person all along. They would fix you with whatever it would take. So that's a very different kind of model. And some countries have that and seem to be doing all right with it. Our country doesn't.
When we talk about entanglement, over the weekend, actually this is all one long conversation. Everything is connected. You and I have talked about that before, but everything is indeed connected. And over the weekend here in Los Angeles, there was a protest that went from Beverly Hills miles and miles back all the way into Hollywood and Highland and the central part of Hollywood. Now, if anybody knows Los Angeles, you do that driving a car, it takes you 30 minutes. It's a long drive. Mm-hmm. It was from beginning to end full of people. It was well north of 100,000. They never got a final count on it. But I look at that and I see the weaving through the streets. You know, the people in the front don't know what the people in the back are doing, but yet they are all connected. And it seems like there is some type of either mild or direct form of entanglement going on there, because it is also happening at the same time across the United States and around the world. Mm-hmm. Is there a collective consciousness there? You know, it's like a giant school of tuna almost.
Right.
Is that what is going on?
I think to some degree. We are social animals. Lots of animals are social. I think the exception are animals that are completely independent. But humans certainly are drawn to other people because we like the feeling of the group. So some of it is that. The question is whether it's something more than that. Well, things happening simultaneously around the world now can be explained because of media. You watch something and you get all excited about it and say, well, we want to do that too. And it's true. It's like protests exploded everywhere simultaneously. But there's more of an esoteric view of it as well, and that is that you're saying that everything is connected. Well, if you jump out of science for a moment and you put on your metaphysical hat, all of the esoteric traditions, and by the way, this is my fourth book, which you didn't mention, called Real Magic, which came out in 2018. The point of that book was to look at some of the phenomena they study, things like telepathy and so on, and try to come up with a model that makes sense, that would explain it, because standard materialistic science doesn't do a very good job.
Right.
So there's three commonalities to all of the esoteric ideas throughout history. And the esoterica has been around for tens of thousands of years as compared to science, which is roughly 400 years old.
Mm-hmm.
So the three principles are consciousness is fundamental. That's basically the repeated theme in every form of esoteric knowledge. The second is everything is interconnected, which is sort of a corollary of consciousness is fundamental. And the third is there is only one consciousness. So all of those are wrapped together. And so from that perspective, if that is true, and I believe that actually some of that is true, though those principles are actually true, then even though people might be isolated somewhere in some other part of the world and not paying attention to the media, they may well feel drawn together into groups to protest about something, or maybe not to protest, maybe to have a party or something, but they're going to be drawn together because some aspect of themselves is feeling this drawing together that is happening elsewhere in the world. And so one of the things I think we'll get to tonight is the Global Consciousness Project, which was specifically designed to see if that idea has any merit to it.
That's right. And I can't wait to get to that. And there's some questions that are coming in from Twitter about that, by the way. So we will get to that. But there is another part of this. I realize that racism continues to be an issue, and we've got to fix so many different things. And that Black lives do matter, and the fear of being Black and dealing with the police is something real. I'm white. I don't have those. It's just one of those things. I'm not going to hide these facts. But that being said, the things that we are seeing right now with the protest about Black Lives Matter, it's Black Lives Matter, but could it have been anything that would have ignited this? Is there something else deep-seated going on here that the need to protest and to stand up for change is there? And it's Black Lives Matter that is what's the catalyst today. But we've also been locked up for 3 or 4 months, and anything could have lit that candle.
Yeah, as I said, we're sitting on a powder keg and waiting for something to ignite it. And racism has been a long simmering problem in every country. Actually, it's not just here. It was a spark. And of course, in the combination of the videos, which are now becoming more popular and showing up on the news, and people see these things and they explode, and realistically so. I understand it. So that was something that was very likely to happen. It's in the same way that we knew that a pandemic was going to happen at some point. We knew at some point something was going to spark such outrage in combination with people being cooped up for such a long time, that it'll spill out in the way that it has.
The solutions we have, and this is the other thing when we talk about consciousness and the mind and collective consciousness. Everybody's dealing with the same issues that right now have piled up. I mean, they seem insurmountable, where there's no light at the end of the tunnel, right? And people need to have hope. And right now, there doesn't seem to be answers for anybody and a way out of this. And that goes from the individual, like you and I, all the way up to law enforcement, to local and national governments, and then on and out to the rest of the world. This is the reality that we find ourselves in. So how do we get to that light at the end of the tunnel?
Well, I think we're beginning to see it. I mean, look at the number of big corporations and small corporations that are explicitly changing policies as a result of the movement, the Black Lives Matter movement. You see more and more of them all the time. We're seeing the government respond to this, and in other countries as well. So like any large social change, you're always pushing against the status quo, and you're pushing against taboos that have been in place for a long time. And so I always think of things like same-sex marriage as a similar kind of long-held taboo. And activists were working on this for decades, and then it seemed like suddenly, in the course of a couple of years, like practically everywhere in the world, including the United States, now it's legal. It's like not an issue anymore. The same goes for legalized marijuana. The same will go for racism, except that is much more entrenched. It's entrenched in a way which is not quite the same as same-sex marriage or as marijuana, but almost driven into our DNA. We're social animals, but only social up to a degree. That seems to be part of our DNA going all the way back into tribalism. And that's going to be a much more difficult social thing to change, but I think it eventually will. And if things change like this and they're chaotic, right? If you're pushing against something that doesn't want to change and it has to be forced, it's pushed again and again, and eventually it crumbles. And then at some point people will look back at this and say, really? People were racist? How stupid is that?
The DNA aspect of this, which is what I was alluding to in my own primitive way earlier in the show, in that we are reacting, but we don't know why we are reacting. That it is, it is so deep inside of us, down to DNA, that we don't understand that. But collectively, it is there. It seems that we all have it, Dr. Radin.
Yeah, we're primates. We're slightly intelligent primates. When you look at groups of monkeys and they encounter another tribe, they are not nice. It's very rare in the primate world to see anything other than extreme aggression against the other. And so why are we any different? Well, we're not. It's part of how we're hardwired. So that's why it's so difficult to break.
If the internet wasn't here today, and I mean it like this, when the internet became itself back in 1995, like the big steps, America Online, where now we're connecting around the world, but and now we understand how we can affect change in literally nanoseconds worldwide, affect the collective consciousness. But if the internet wasn't here today, would these same things be happening collectively with the consciousness? Because the problems are still there, right? Mm-hmm. All of these deep-seated problems. Would everything still come to a head anyway?
I think it would, except it'd be much, much slower. It would, like the esoteric form of interconnectedness has always been there. Everything's connected. But that doesn't have the same kind of spark to it. Like we're so driven visually, we're visual creatures. You see a video of something horrific happening, that pushes everybody emotionally in a way that it would be much more subtle if we didn't have instant media everywhere. And of course, the other thing is that if we didn't have the internet, we wouldn't be watching all those cat videos. So we'd probably be a little bit more intelligent, because maybe we'd be reading books and things, because the cat video phenomenon, and other similar things, they suck up a lot of attention and time.
And with that is a really great point. We've got 3 minutes before the break. Do you think that the exercising of our brain has taken a back seat? Right? We don't need to memorize locations or driving or phone numbers or names or we don't have to do that anymore.
We have offloaded it to little flat computers that we carry around with us. It's true. So it's you use it or you lose it. And it goes with memory. It goes with all kinds of things. So, yeah, I think we're not I know this as a journal editor, where I see manuscripts that are submitted all the time. Mm-hmm. People don't know how to write anymore. I mean, we're talking about professionals, scientists and scholars who can't write. Well, that's discouraging, and it suggests that people are either not trained or not doing it enough or something. So, yeah, we're collectively becoming dumber in some ways, but we're also gaining new skills, right? I mean, it takes a certain degree of skill to use a computer or a smartphone, so we're trading one set of skills for another.
Yeah, my daughters can text like nobody's business.
Yeah.
The DNA has been altered for future generations. All children will be able to text with their thumbs at lightning speed. And that's a generational thing that is happening now. I firmly believe that. And then there's another part that goes with it, and I've got 45 seconds, in that because we're not using our brains and we're depending so much on the internet and our cell phones, that if it's on the internet now, it must be true. We don't go and research. That becomes automatic, doesn't it?
Yep, and that's a big problem.
That is a huge problem. Let's take our break right here. Our guest tonight, Dr. Dean Radin. So much to discuss. And listen, I'm going to let everybody know, I see what's going on with questions and my email and Twitter, and I will get to all of those. All right? That's my promise. I'll be right back. More with Dr. Dean Radin after this short break. Stay with us.
Way out here, we listen to Jimmy Church.
You're listening to Fade to Black.
Always on the edge of the hottest alternative talk. Jimmy Church with Fade to Black. KGRARadio.com.
¿Qué tal, mis amigos? Yo soy Mario Carson, el tiburón, y los invito para que escuchen a mi buen amigo Jimmy Church Radio. ¡Claro que sí!
Do you want to be an official Fadernaut? Of course you do. This is Jimmy Church of Fade to Black. Just go to our membership section at jimmychurchradio.com. Introducing the new Surfer Music app. Listen, Fadernauts, you know I love my music. This is my go-to for all things notes. The Surfer app is a brand new concept in music listening. Surfer is free, providing unlimited access to thousands of live streaming radio stations. Surfer is an exciting, interactive listening experience. Discovery and surprise are built right in. Surfer is your destination to discover and rediscover great live streaming music. It features high-quality audio streams, free access to music from thousands of live streaming radio stations, unlimited listening, unlimited skipping. You get a music visualizer, and you can also select your favorite channels. Get it at the Apple App Store or Google Play. Just search Surfer Music or click on the Surfer banner at jimmychurchradio.com. Go Beckley Teppy.
So, you love talk radio? Then you'll love TalkStreamLive.com. TalkStream Live is always on, 24/7, with the best streaming talk shows. Find your favorite talkers and discover some new ones. It's free, readily available online or on mobile with any smartphone or tablet. Finding your favorite talk shows all in one place has gotten a whole lot easier. Just go to TalkStreamLive.com. Be sure to download the free apps from Google Play or the iTunes App Store.
You listen to us, and we listen to you. And so does the CIA. KGRARadio.com.
If you have hard water, the lime scale not only leaves white spots, it clogs pipes and breaks down appliances, costing you hundreds of dollars in energy and wear. Eliminate lime scale and other water issues like brown staining and bad odors with HydroCare water products available from Wave Home Solutions. Wave's affordable water systems don't use salts or chemicals. You'll love the way your water tastes, smells, and looks. Satisfaction guaranteed. For more information, go to bestwater123.com. That's bestwater123.com.
Are you intrigued by paranormal talk radio? You'll love the new Paranormal Radio app from TalkStream Live. You'll find a great selection of talk shows covering UFOs, ghosts, strange phenomena, and much more. Download the Paranormal Radio app now and start listening to the very best in paranormal talk entertainment, including the network you're listening to right now. The Paranormal Radio app, free in Google Play and the iOS App Store.
You are listening to Fade to Black with Jimmy Church on the Game Changer Network.
Oi, oi, I'm Reese Evans. You're listening to Jimmy Church. This is Revolution. The revolution will not be televised. The revolution is on radio. Ciao.
Welcome back, Fade to Black. I am your host, Jimmy Church. Tonight, our guest, Dr. Dean Radin. Now, if you ever miss a live broadcast, this is a live radio show, but if you ever miss a live broadcast, just go and get our podcast. You can pick it up over on our website, and it's just $2 per month, and we have over 1,250 episodes right there for you for just $2 per month, including, you mentioned your book on magic, Dr. Radin, and that book, which I have, and that interview we did last year about it was one of the most fascinating conversations I've had on the show. I want to thank you for that. And I came away with, I'm not going to get into it, but I came away with a couple of thoughts and conclusions that you presented that night that have stuck with me. I've stolen it and repeated it to this day, and I sound really smart. So I thank you for that. I want to tell everybody, and this is highly recommended, you need to go to noetic.org. The links are over at jimmychurchradio.com. There is so much information. It's the experiments that you can not only participate in at home, but all of the exciting research and the goals that you guys are trying to achieve over there. It's an absolutely first-class website, and I just highly recommend it. I spend a lot of time over there. Right before the break, you started to mention your latest global project. I want to get back into that. What is it, and what is going on?
Okay, so the Global Consciousness Project was started in 1998 by a colleague at Princeton, Roger Nelson, and the idea was to test this hypothesis, or this idea that mind and matter are like two sides of the same coin. So if that is true, that mind and matter are not the same, but they're tightly coupled, then we figured that during times when a large-scale percentage of the population of the world was paying attention to the same thing, that would be quite unusual in terms of when you think of it as a large-scale coherence effect. It's a mental coherence because everyone's paying attention to the same thing at the same time. So we were discussing this when I was at Princeton, and then later for years. We were thinking, how would we go about the test if that is actually true? And one of the first tests that I did that was similar to this was during the O.J. Simpson trial. So the O.J. Simpson trial was one of the first times in modern history where the estimates were that at least 100 million people were listening live on the radio and watching on TV for a 1-second event, which was when the foreman would say either guilty or not guilty at the end of the trial. Well, that was like a perfect test case for a testing of this mind-matter interaction effect. So what we did was, first of all, if you imagine that there's this large-scale mental coherence, if that's happening on the mind side of the coin, then the other side of the coin must also go through some kind of coherence because of this correlation. So we figured, okay, what could we measure in the physical world where we could detect that it suddenly became coherent? And so the obvious answer was we could detect random events, or measure random events, because by definition, a series of random events, like a random number generator, is designed to produce maximum entropy. But that means maximum disorder. And it's doing it all the time. That's through the stream of zeros and ones that are in a random sequence. And this is a hardware device, so it's truly random events that are traced all the way down to quantum phenomena. So we said, okay, we'll run random number generators before, during, and after the announcement of the verdict for the O.J. Simpson event, and we'll make the hypothesis that within a minute or so, or right around the time that the verdict is announced, you have 100 million people's minds all becoming coherent. And so at that point, we would expect coherence to also appear in the random generators because they're physical devices. And how would you detect it? You detect it as a drop in entropy.
So it would be very pragmatic, black or white, yes or no, right? It's either happening or it is not.
Right. So that's the beauty of coming up with a good hypothesis and a way to test it.
Sure.
It would tell you whether you're on the right track or not. So what we would look for then was moments of order appearing in devices which were designed to produce maximum disorder. And so you can do that statistically very easily. So we did that experiment. We had 5 random number generators going. We traced before and afterwards, and we found very clear evidence that within a minute, actually less than a minute of the reading of the verdict, we saw a very significant change in the amount of randomness that was being produced by the generators. They were becoming less random. And then after the verdict was read, it reverted back to ordinary behavior. So when we were discussing that kind of result and lots of others like that, we decided, Roger, me, and a few others decided to make a worldwide version of this, because that experiment required that we knew an event was coming up, and we had to get all our colleagues to run their generators, and we wanted something that was completely automatic, and also that we could take advantage of things that were unpredicted, like big earthquakes or terrorist attacks. So Roger and his son devised a way of using the internet as a way of putting random number generators in major cities around the world, and they would produce random data every second, and every 5 minutes they would transmit all of that data up to a server at Princeton. And so this has been running continuously since August of 1998. So the formal experiment there was to either look in advance for planned events. These are things like presidential elections and large-scale meditations and things like that, or unplanned events like earthquakes and terrorist attacks and deaths of celebrities and things like that. And then we would say, okay, this looks like it will attract tens to hundreds of millions or more people at the same time, and we can use that period. We would define the length of time, sometimes 1 hour, sometimes 24 hours, based on the nature of the event. You'd use that amount of time, and then we'd look at the data being produced by these generators around the world and to see whether or not it was deviating from chance expectation. So we did 500 formal events.
Whoa.
Over the course of the 21 years or so that this thing has been running.
Right.
And the overall result, you can combine the results of all of these events, is a 7 sigma result. So that means that when you cast that in terms of odds against chance, it's 3 trillion to 1. That's it. So we're seeing deviations at times of large-scale world events with odds against chance of 3 trillion to 1. That means that is not chance. We'd have to run the same 20-year experiment 3 trillion times to come up with a result as good or better than what we saw. So that's not going to happen because the universe hasn't been around that long. So that provides pretty strong evidence that there's some very strong relationship between mind and matter that is very difficult to explain purely in terms of brain-centric consciousness, because we're talking about a worldwide effect that affected all of the generators at the same time. And now, because of that pretty clear result, we're working on what we call GCP2. The first one was GCP1.
Mm-hmm.
The new version will have, well, first of all, the GCP1 had at its peak around 75 random generators running around the world. Today it has dropped down a little bit, down to around 20. And it's partially because it's older technology and some people have turned off their generators and so on. GCP2 will have several thousand generators that are being built with new principles and have a whole bunch of other data that we can store at the same time and use the infrastructure of the Internet of Things. So you'll be able to buy a little device. We don't know how much it'll cost yet, maybe $100 or something, which you would just put in your house somewhere. And around the world, we hope we have thousands of these things, and it'll constantly produce data that'll be recorded in the cloud. And we'll be able to do much more precise analyses, because one of the things that we wanted to do was to see if we could localize effects. We didn't have enough generators around the world to be able to say, if there's an earthquake in Turkey, is there more of a consciousness effect there because people are paying attention? And if so, would we see a bigger change in those generators than we would like in New York City?
Right.
Well, we could do that in a very rudimentary way because we didn't have very many generators running. But if we have thousands, we'll be able to get highly specific information. We think not only when something happens, but possibly before it happens. And this is based on a number of events, including 9/11 and a few others, where the generators are running and seem to show an effect that were happening roughly 3 hours before it actually unfolded. And of course, if we know beforehand that something is going to happen in a given location, that becomes an extremely valuable tool, a prediction tool. So that's what we're moving towards.
Could the random, I'm sure you thought about this, but this is an honest question. Could it be something that could be downloaded as an app, random generator, so you could have potentially millions around the world on cell phones? Or is it too complex and too large?
Well, so a colleague of ours was working on an app, an Entangled app, just like you're saying. And it is possible to get very close to truly random numbers in most smartphones. You use the sensors in the phone to produce random numbers.
Mm-hmm.
That app was under development for a couple of years. I saw the beta version, looked pretty good. And so in principle, we could have had millions, but it was never finished. And so it technically became complex, overly complex. And so at least for our GCP2 network, we're going to go with the Internet of Things, which makes it actually, from a technical point of view, much simpler. Like it's nice to have millions of data points coming in every second. It's overwhelming. We wouldn't even know what to do with it. So having a few thousand generators, it becomes manageable. In the future, when we all have quantum computers on our desks, and we have petabytes in our Dropbox, maybe then we can handle that kind of data. But right now, we don't want to get overwhelmed.
Well, you mentioned meditation earlier, speaking about random number generators. I host the Mass Meditation Initiative each year here in LA. And last year we had about 20,000 people at one location here in downtown Los Angeles. And to watch everybody, now, I like to joke and I like to have fun. It's a very serious moment as we're leading into this mass meditation, in downtown LA. But I made this little joke, and the joke went something like this. It was improvised, so it wasn't like I had it down. But the suggestion was, we're about to do this mass meditation. And while we're doing the meditation, there will be somebody in New York City, some grumpy old man, walking down the street complaining about life and is going to feel an electric jolt. Right? And it's going to go, wow, I feel kindler and gentler. Mm-hmm. And I don't know why. Now, I'm making a joke about that because I'm telling everybody about how exciting it is to do this mass meditation, and people around the world are going to feel this. But when I make this suggestion, I'm not that far off the mark, am I?
No, there is evidence that large-scale mental effects does affect the world, including our bodies and bodies at a distance. Probably the best-known body of data looking at that has been by the transcendental meditators who would meditate and then look at things like crime statistics, usually in the vicinity, and show that they change. Probably their most famous one was a big effort like that in Washington, D.C., which showed very interesting results, suggesting that when you get a large group of people who are particularly calm, that the calm somehow radiates out. And so there's also this lore about certain individuals who radiate goodness. And I've met a few people like that. So I met the Dalai Lama one time. He kind of radiates goodness. You can feel it, feel something like that. And I met a lady who was in charge of a large-scale meditation society in the world. And she, too, just being in her presence, even though she wasn't meditating at the time, although perhaps at their level they're meditating constantly, you can feel something. And I'm not even that particularly sensitive to these kinds of things, but even I was able to feel it, which is why it was kind of shocking to me. Mm-hmm. So you can imagine if you got a lot of meditators together and they're really on the same wavelength, and that seems to be an important point here, that if you have a large number of people but they're not coherent, they're not in alignment with each other, you could end up with nothing. It's like I use the metaphor of a soap bubble. A soap bubble is a real structure. It could persist for quite a while, but it takes only one thing slightly out of step to break the bubble. So the kind of coherence we're talking about mentally is like that soap bubble. It can be created as a physical thing. It affects the physical world, including our bodies and minds and other people as well. But there's also a flip side. The flip side is you can have organizations around the world who have very bad intent, and they're very much in alignment. And so you wake up one day and you're feeling very out of sorts and kind of angry with no apparent cause. Well, maybe it's because there's some group on the other side of the planet that is sending you bad thoughts.
Focus.
Not just you, but a lot of people.
Right.
So we're talking about what I think of it as a natural phenomenon. It's like a force, like an electrical force. It can be good or bad. It has different charges. How we use it, how we wish to use it, is up to us, but it's simply a fact of nature. It's the way things work.
Now, you're to me, very balanced. Your feet are on the ground, and I can't imagine you getting your feet more on the ground or being more balanced. But you meet the Dalai Lama. That's pretty cool. And you got inside that soap bubble, right? When you walked away, were you an even more grounded, kinder, gentler Dr. Dean Radin than before?
I don't think so. No, I mean, at the time, it was part of a small group, and he was going to give a talk, and I gave a little talk. It was adjusted in a way where, because he's at the same time as a leader of a country, mm-hmm. he had his equivalent of his Secret Service, like everywhere, checking everyone out, making sure the place was safe and so on. So it had a bit of a overlay on the event that made it not like a typical meditation, event. But even in that context, he was radiating something that felt awfully good.
If you could, I don't know what you discussed with him or if you spoke to him at all, but when we talk about the mind and the brain and consciousness, given the opportunity to ask him what is going on, what would you ask him?
I would probably ask him about the oracle, which is part of the Tibetan, the government. The government is partially Western, partially Eastern, and quite a bit of esoteric ideas that are thrown in as well. So the oracle is somebody who is assigned to help the people like the Dalai Lama and others in government to forecast what is happening in a psychic way. And so they don't see it as strange. They see it as part of their tradition, and there are stories that they give on why they believe that it's something that's real. So I would ask him, given that he's Dalai Lama in particular has held dialogues with scientists and scholars around the world for many years, those dialogues, many times the Dalai Lama and the other monks would bring up ideas of reincarnation and oracles and things of that sort. And Western scientists they blanch because they don't want to talk about it. They don't want to say something to the Dalai Lama saying, no, that's nonsense. You're never going to say that to him. But so they either say, well, science doesn't know anything about this, or we're not prepared to talk about that. I'd like to have a meeting where we're specifically talking about that and gain their insight then on how best science can grasp those concepts in a way that doesn't cause violence to the prevailing view of reality. So, I mean, I'm comfortable with those ideas because those are the kinds of phenomena that I study. But I haven't had the opportunity to do that yet. When
I've often wondered when it comes to the Dalai Lama and the reincarnation aspect and how he was located and who he is, right? And watching him grow up, that you just mentioned this, that there are groups from around the world, scientists and intellectuals and researchers trying to figure out consciousness in the brain that go to him for consultation. Where does he get his knowledge from? That's the part, because they stop and they listen to every word, right? They're taking notes and they're going back to their universities and countries to continue their research, based on the conversations and the meetings that they've had with him. But where does he get his knowledge from?
Well, he was tutored extensively in Western knowledge. So he is quite wise from that perspective, and has the same amount of tutoring about Eastern knowledge, Buddhism. So he's an embodiment of somebody who has pulled both sides together, and not in a way where it's fighting with each other, but has integrated it in a natural way. So it makes sense then for Western scientists, and by Western I don't mean just the Western part of the world, but it's science in general is like Western science. Western scientists who are not involved in Buddhism and maybe they don't meditate and they don't think about psychic phenomena, they're pulled into a kind of awe state. Like, here's a person who's very smart. He knows a lot about science and politics and scholarship and lots of other things. And at the same time, he's talking about reincarnation and precognition and all that. Well, how can that be?
Right.
So I think that's very useful then for scientists and scholars to be in the presence of somebody like that, because it's very difficult for a classically Western-trained scientist or academic to feel comfortable with this other side of ourselves, which I think is a pity. That's simply the way our education works. But it's useful then and this is why people are drawn to him.
That's one of the best points that we can make tonight, because then we are forced to, and when you say Western, let's just say the rest of the world is what we're talking about. Yeah. At what is our reality? does it encompass everything that not only he is suggesting, but that the metaphysical side and the conscious community speaks about? But that's not part of everybody else's reality. Where does it start and where does it end?
And again, it spends a lot of the answer to that question depends on whether your worldview is grounded in materialism,
right,
or whether it's grounded in idealism or some other flavor. Ultimately, people believe what they want to believe. And if somebody comes from a very religious background, they have an extremely different view of the nature of reality. If they are trained in a scientific background, they have a different view again. If they're a layperson, each person is seeing the world not clearly. We can't see the world clearly because as an individual, we are not able to encompass enough of the world to see it in a clearer way. So one of the reasons why I meditate is partially because it's physically good, but also it helps calm down the mind. It helps clear those lenses that we see the world through. Most of the people that I know who are meditators, scientists in particular, are way more open to the idea that we don't actually know that much about reality. Science has done quite a good job on it and explaining certain things, but there's a huge amount that we don't really know very well yet.
And they don't want to take the time either.
Well, it's true. I mean, we're all busy doing whatever we're doing, so you can't learn everything.
Right.
So, and especially in the academic world, you're trained to be an expert in one thing. It's difficult to get off of that track. You probably can't remain in the academic world if you're a polymath who's interested in learning everything. So there's all kinds of social pressures that pull us away from trying to get a clear view of the way things are. So my particular meditation style is Vipassana, which translated, I think, from Sanskrit, means to see the world the way it is. That's what it is. So that's been translated now into mindfulness meditation, which is popular everywhere. Mm-hmm. And it's all about seeing the world the way it is as best as you can, rather than projecting upon it through the lenses that were from our culture and our education and so on.
Last month, Sean Carroll, I'm reading his new book, and he's doing an interview about the book, and I'm listening to it. And he says this, and he's a great physicist, and I appreciate and respect him, but this is what he says, Dr. Radin. Mm-hmm. He goes, yes, the multiverse is blah, blah, blah. And there are infinite versions of you that exist out in a parallel stance to the left and to the right. This is reality, and this is part of my research. But I don't believe in ghosts. Right?
Yeah, or ESP.
Yeah, right. It doesn't make any sense. And then the interviewer said, well, why? And he said, well, first off, I don't have the time to worry about stuff that isn't real. Mm-hmm. But yet the multiverse is real.
Yeah, so this is a great example of the lenses that he has created are based in pretty solid mathematics and multidimensional mathematics and so on. And he lives in that. So his lenses for him are completely natural. He sees it. But this is also why he cannot see, almost literally cannot see, that there's an enormous amount of evidence for apparitions, for ESP, for lots of other things. So he's not attuned to it. He can't see it.
Do you think if he went up to Noetic and hung out with the Ions group, that his eyes could be opened, or there's no chance of it? Or any of the professional physicists out there?
Well, there certainly are some physicists who completely accept the data, usually because they have their own experiences. They're looking for confirmation that it wasn't a hallucination.
Right.
Because the psychic phenomena are perfectly natural and happen to everybody, except people who really, really don't want to believe it. They can suppress it. This is one of the stories I write in Real Magic, where I'm talking about Michael Shermer, who's a very well-known skeptic. publishes the Skeptic magazine. And he, of course, his whole career is denying the reality of psychic phenomena, except for one very strange column that he wrote in Scientific American, where he talks about this strange event that happened, where he said it shook him to his core, that something bizarre happened, and we should be much more open to these kinds of events. And it was sort of a ghost-like, the event. So 2 years later, he writes a column where he completely denies all of it. He said we shouldn't study these things because they're impossible, and we shouldn't even pay attention to it. And that, in a sense, shows that once your lenses are in place, you can momentarily experience something that it can be really shocking to you. But if it's too shocking, your psychological state will come into play and readjust your lenses so you've erased it. And so this is suppression. This is a well-known psychological effect that happens when you simply don't want to see certain things.
We need to take our break right here. Let's do that. But but try to get Michael Shermer to go into a haunted house. Right. We'll be right back after this short break. Our guest tonight, Dr. Dean Radin. Your questions are next. I'll get to all of them. Stay with us.
Hi everybody, this is Rob Halford, the Metal Guard on JimmyChurchRadio.com.
This is KGRA Digital Broadcasting Station, Salt Lake City, Utah, Van Buren, Arkansas.
Why is it we're not very good with our health regimen until it's too late? We don't put oil in the car until the engine blows up. When the body's out of balance, your health is not so good. Give your body some love. Log on to GetTheT.com. That's GetTheT.com. Try our Life Change Tea, which cleanses you from harmful intruders. A clean colon is one of the ways to bring the body in balance. We also carry organic supplements to help you get where you need to go. So do your body a favor. Log on to GetTheT.com. That's GetTheT.com. You can even visit our sales page to save some dough. Does anybody call money dough anymore? Anyway, if you're looking for short, helpful health tips, go to YouTube and punch in Health Matters Now. That's Health Matters Now. So, log on to GetTheT.com, shop, get balanced, then learn some cool tips at Health Matters Now. You'll be glad you did. That's GetTheT.com.
Your contact for current news and trending topics. KGRARadio.com.
This is Jimmy Church of Fade to Black, and I only drink Fade to Black blend coffee from Rivermoon. Just click on the Rivermoon Coffee banner at jimmychurchradio.com. Promo code F2B Blend.
So are you tired of being tired? Well, then it's time to get the tea. Hey, it's Lisa here to tell you about this all-natural, all-organic tea I've been drinking that has had great results for over 20 years. It's called Life Change Tea, and it's specially formulated to help detoxify and cleanse your kidneys, liver, colon, and blood all at once. The colon is one of the most ignored organs in the human body. The faster that waste is eliminated from the body, the less time that waste sits in our intestines, spreading toxins to our bloodstream. This tea helps cleanse chemicals caused by outside intruders from our entire digestive system. And get this, weight loss can be a side effect. And with continued use of the tea, you can experience clearer, healthier, younger looking skin, increased energy, and a happier outlook on life. So if you're tired of being tired, get the Life Change Tea at GetTheT.com. That's GetTheT.com. And like me, you'll be glad you did.
Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or Wi-Fi available, you can still listen to every minute of Fade to Black by just calling 605-562-4482. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. It saves your data plan and no extra cost if you have unlimited minutes. Just call 605-562-4482. You can listen to me, Jimmy Church, on any phone, anytime, anywhere. Go Beckley Tappy.
You want to know a secret? I love ponies. I really love ponies. I'm serious. I couldn't stay sane without ponies to brush.
Why Fade to Black? Because you never got that pony. Damn it.
This is Fade to Black with Jimmy Church on the Game Changer Radio Network and KGRA, the Global Radio Alliance.
Welcome back, Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Our guest tonight, Dr. Dean Radin. What a great conversation. And you need to go and click on noetic.org. The links are over at jimmychurchradio.com. It is the reason to have the internet. We've been talking about the internet all night tonight, and truly one of the great stopping points on all of the interweb that is out there, noetic.org. Now, Dr. Radin, I've got a bunch of questions here that have been sent in, and I just kind of, we can do a sort of rapid fire and go through these. Are you ready?
Sure.
Okay. This comes in from R&S. Is there a version of the Princeton Global Consciousness Project currently running? If so, what's the effect of the lockdown been on global coherence?
The answer is yes. The website is global-mind.org, where you can see what's happening. There's currently about 25 random generators going, and I just recently did a long-term trend analysis because we have 22 years of data now. And so that trend, I haven't published this yet, but what you see on it are two very sharp negative peaks, both of which are probably significant, but I haven't analyzed that yet. So the two peaks are, one is Hurricane Katrina, where you see a very sharp negative going peak. The other one is COVID. So COVID is drops through the floor. So on the graph, the way that I put it is I can't actually show the bottom of where that spike goes because it would require making the graph too tall. In other words, it really is dropping through the floor. We don't have enough data yet to be able to know when it stops, but it's going straight down. And so I marked in there just as an arbitrary place at January 1st is when it became big around the world. We don't at this point know exactly when it started, maybe November or something like that. But by January 1st, it was really on everybody's radar, even though it wasn't a big deal in this country yet, but it was elsewhere. And so by far, over the past 21 years, that is the biggest event. And the reason these slow-moving trends are very different than the analyses that we've done previously, because all of those are basically something that would last between a few hours and a day. Right. Whereas this is a matter of many months. So it requires 21 years of data in order to be able to see it, but it's big.
Do you anticipate, I haven't seen the graph myself, but knowing how graphs are laid out in the visual side with a linear timeline and the results on one side and a timeline, or however you've got the graph laid out. But do you anticipate this through the floor stance of the graph to be there for months? Is that how I'm visualizing it?
Well, we don't know yet because the line at this point doesn't show any rebound.
That's what I mean. So right now it's January, February, March, April, May, June, right? All of that on the graph is through the floor.
Yep.
Wow.
It's straight down.
Incredible. This comes in from Jace. Jace says, is it true we would go insane if we figure out exactly how the brain works?
I don't think so. No. The thing is that, from a scientific perspective, we'll probably never know exactly how anything works. I think it's attributed to Einstein that you can't understand something at the same level that as your problem. So if we're trying to understand consciousness using consciousness, there's almost a logical limit to how much you could actually know. In terms of brain function, at least the physical portion of the brain, we can and will know much more about it. We already know quite a bit. But there's an enormous amount left to learn. And at some point, one of the reasons why scientists tend to specialize and then subspecialize and even more, you specialize in very, very narrow areas because there's so much to know that you can't shove it all into your head. So at some point, there's a limitation in terms of what any one person can know, and the likelihood of being able to actually cram everything into your head that would understand the exact workings of the brain, I don't think we can do it as Homo sapiens. We'd have to be some other kinds of species to figure that out.
Yeah, that makes sense. Or AI. Yeah, right.
Yeah, but then the AI might understand it, but it'll be so complex it couldn't explain it to us.
I want to, before I let you go tonight, I want to circle back to AI and consciousness briefly. This comes in from JT. JT says, I thought I heard once that in the womb, the heart develops first, the brain later. If so, does the heart have a form of consciousness?
Well, there are those who say that. There's definitely a relationship between the activity of the brain and the heart. I mean, there are neurons that connect the two directly. So some people have, of course, many, many years ago in the medieval times, people thought that your awareness was in your heart and that the brain was a cooling system for your blood. It didn't do anything else. Well, now we understand a little bit better about what's going on, but the heart does contain similar astrocytes and neurons like the brain. There are people talk about heart intelligence. Probably the best known place for promoting that idea is the Institute of Heart Math, which has developed it to refined science. The idea that the true intelligence comes from the heart and the brain is kind of a secondary follower. I don't happen to hold that idea. I think both of them are important, obviously, and that the brain is probably more engaged in actual cognition and memory than the heart. But, there's still a lot to learn.
Well, the old saying, right? Follow your heart.
Right, which could be a metaphor for follow your intuition or follow your emotions rather than the organ itself.
This comes in from Serenity. Does consciousness stop when the brain body dies? Well, there you go. The ongoing question, but there it is.
Right. Is there some form of survival of consciousness? Well, if you take a mainstream scientific perspective, when the brain stops, you're dead. That's the end of it. If you look at the actual phenomena that people report, the answer is much more complex. Probably the largest body of anecdotal evidence is near-death experiences. So there, if you have a heart attack, roughly 30 seconds later, you're flatlined. Your brain is not working anymore. And yet people report experiences. So there's like one set of data suggesting that people remain some kind of consciousness, some kind of awareness, even though their body is dead by all conventional ways of thinking about life and death. There's also a lot of other evidence. So there's something called terminal lucidity, which is quite odd, in which people with severe dementia or Alzheimer's or have been in coma for long periods of time and are basically like a vegetable, they're not responsive, that hours before they die, they suddenly become lucid. They wake up, they talk to people, and they know who they're talking to, they have memory, they discuss things, basically they're saying goodbye, and then they're dead. And so we don't understand that at all. If somebody's in a coma for a long time or has advanced Alzheimer's, their brain is not able to work in a normal way. They can't be lucid from a conventional perspective, and yet they are. So this, again, is another form of evidence suggesting that brain and consciousness are linked in some way, but they're not the same thing. Other examples are, well, first of all, like genius. Everybody would agree that there are musical geniuses and mathematical geniuses and so on. We don't understand that at all. We don't understand anything about how somebody can be that. And in a related way, there are autistic savants. So severe autism, and yet are able to do incredible things in music and mathematics and art that we don't understand. And even stranger than that are the so-called acquired savants, where somebody is perfectly normal, gets a bump on the head, and the next day they're the concert pianist.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And then even stranger are the spontaneous savants. These are people who just go to sleep one day, don't have any trauma happening to their head, and they wake up and now they can play the piano.
Right, and speak Cantonese.
Yeah, like just completely spontaneously. We have no idea how that could happen. But again, it suggests that brain and mind and consciousness are not exactly the same thing. And then, of course, the whole array of psychic experiences, which are very difficult to explain in a materialistic way, and mediumship and channeling and so on. So there's this long list of evidence which is dismissed pretty much by the mainstream. And yet there's both scientific evidence, there's a huge number of anecdotes that if you pay attention to it, provide a stronger and stronger case that can be made that brain and mind and consciousness are related but are not the same thing. That then leads to an idea that maybe in some cases, or maybe in all cases, when your brain stops working, some aspect of your awareness continues. Whether that continues as your personality is another issue.
I spent, I was in the hospital for an extended stay when I was about 20 years old. And the beginning of this stay, it was a month, the first 4 days were in and out of coma. I don't remember any of that. I know that I was out for 4 days. But during those 4 days, Dean, I was so happy. And what I went through, my mind and those things, I'm not going to get into that. But when I came out of it, I was pretty pissed off. I wanted to go back.
Yeah.
I wanted to go back. It was it was wonderful. Okay, let's go back to the questions. Let's see here. This is from Mark. How do we get from the proverbial primeval soup to the complexity of human consciousness of today?
Well, you'd have to talk to a cosmologist about that. There are certainly ways of thinking about how, if there was a Big Bang, I mean, it's a prevailing cosmological theory, but there are some questions being raised about that. Mm-hmm. But assume that was the case. You start out with something extremely energetic that begins to cool down and emerge into particles, and particles combine. And we already see evidence in deep space of organic molecules, so they will combine in more and more complex ways. There's now thought that complex organic molecules fall onto planets, and then in the right kind of circumstances like volcanic heat vents, you find that polymers or chains of proteins begin to spontaneously form. And if you add a couple of billion years onto the evolutionary push, here we are. So the establishment of evolution is pretty clear. There is spontaneous order that arises in the universe. At this point, it doesn't look like it's magical. It's simply the way that energy can cluster together into forms that are more efficient. And so a story can be made, a narrative can be made roughly from the Big Bang, add 14 billion years to it, and you'd end up with something like us. So the interesting thing about evolution is that we're shaped by the environment. So the lesson that I learned was I worked at a university once, and next door was an ornithologist who collected birds. And so he had this huge bird collection, and I saw penguins. I said, "Oh, look at that. Those are penguins." And he said, "No, those are auks." I said, "What's an auk?" He said, "Well, there are penguins in the North Pole, and there are auks in the South Pole." I said, "But that looks exactly like a penguin." And he said, "Yeah, that's what evolution does. It will shape the organism so it is best matched to the environment." So if we find a so-called M-class planet out there that is similar to the Earth, it is reasonably likely that we'll find humanoid kinds of creatures there. We find other planets, we may not recognize intelligent creatures at all because they'll be shaped by evolution to be something very, very different.
Yeah, gravity would come into play.
Yeah, and the atmosphere and all
the atmosphere and everything else. Sure, sure. The okay, let me get back to the questions. You forced me to ask other questions. I want to stay with. Let's see. Okay, this is great. Sarah Ann, I'm going to thank you for this question. I can't wait to hear Dr. Radin's answer. If burgers equal comfort, which equal relief, is the result good or bad?
The result of one burger is probably good. The result of eating a burger as your primary meal every day is probably bad.
What are you saying? What are you saying about me personally right now?
Well, see, let's put it into the form of something like donuts. So like one donut with a coffee, that's like the best thing ever. But a good donut with every single coffee, that's not a good idea.
Oh, you're right about that.
Yeah. So I mean, we're attracted to sugar and fat because that's simply what our bodies want. Like we're running on glucose, so we need sugar, and we need fat so that we can maintain the glucose level. So that's hardwired into simply the way our bodies work. So if you go back far enough in time, it was pretty rare to get any kind of sugar, especially refined sugar. And also rare to get meat, so we didn't have that much fat. We now live in a time where you can have as much fat and sugar as you want, and you're hardwired to want to get all of it all the time because that feels good. So just because something feels good doesn't mean you want to overdo it.
Okay, here we go. There's so many great questions. This is from Mike. Humanity seems to be in resonance right now. Could that be the catalyst for finally addressing systemic racism and the inequalities of black people have struggled against I think that's history.
Mm-hmm. Well, yes, in the same way that when you have a chaotic system, at some point the evolution of that system bifurcates, right? If you start with something, as we were discussing before, a long-held taboo, a long-held status quo, it's not going to change until something really big happens. So you go through, you imagine this line, a graph with a line on it that doesn't change, something is going to make it explode. At that point, it's going to go through all kinds of chaotic variations, and it will settle into a new stage. So that if it's pointing in one direction, it goes through chaos, it'll be pointing in a new direction. So what we hope is that the new direction is for everyone's benefit. It won't necessarily go in that direction, but if we push it, it will. And I think we're beginning to see this happen. As I said before, that restaurants and major retail places and governments, local and federal, are all beginning to address this issue in a new way. So this may not solve it, but I think it is pushing it in a direction that eventually will make it easier and easier. And at some point in our future, we will have solved this. One more taboo that needs to break.
I wanted to, before we wrap here, I wanted to get back to AI and consciousness because I've heard the same things that you were suggesting tonight from many professionals out there that deal with machine learning and AI, that consciousness could very well be a byproduct of just assembling the mind and machine learning onto a chip, and then ultimately it's a natural process. But do you think that the experiences that we acquire of being human, which force us to make decisions, and it could be anything, it could be your love of music or colors or whatever, that will dictate your decisions. And then after we complete a project or something and conquer it, whatever it may be, then we go and pick up another hobby or we go and do something else. Would AI start to develop, not only consciousness, but the ability to think like a human in those regards, right? A computer that goes and figures out how to play chess and beat everybody on the planet, does that computer then go, well, okay, I'm done with chess. Now I want to go and figure out tennis? right? These are human decisions. Do you think AI will get to that point?
I think it will. Yeah. I mean, there's a big push now on so-called generalized AI.
Yeah, AGI.
So in the AGI world, the idea is not to try to program everything in advance, but to essentially have the machine or the software evolve and learn. So the primitive versions 20 years ago were neural networks, which have turned out to be very effective in solving certain kinds of questions. The thing is, so that you could end up with an AI that is like an android that would have the appearance of awareness, but it'll be very difficult to know whether it is actually aware. And so it turns out that Alan Turing, the famous computer scientist who kind of started the whole computer revolution, he was pondering this very question. You should develop a sufficiently smart computer. How do you know whether it's actually conscious or not? And his solution to that was that if it could demonstrate telepathy, then you would know that it had consciousness. So, I mean, Turing was a pretty smart guy. Very few people know that was his solution to the Turing test. It's not that you would get a simulation of an aware creature on the other end of the line, but that it would have a telepathic rapport. Because the idea there is that telepathy is not exactly a physical thing. It's a non-physical phenomenon of some type. And consciousness also seems to be a non-physical phenomenon. So that's his solution. And I think it would be a proper one. You get an android or a very smart AI and can demonstrate that it can do telepathy, well, that would be probably good enough.
Do you have the fear of AI and, and we've all heard, the stories and the warnings about what that would mean. Do you have a fear of it, or do you think it's unfounded?
I don't have a fear of the AI itself. I have a fear that we're not going to be smart enough to know how to put the billions of people who would be put out of work by the AIs. Because, and this again goes back to the notion that as long as we're driven by profit, then people are going to use AI up the wazoo. You have robots with AI and everything. And many, many jobs, including technical and analytical jobs, will be taken away because the AI is going to be a lot more efficient. And so if we don't solve that problem, we have a major, major problem. So that's the only part of this that I'm concerned about. It would be nice if everybody could then just have leisure time and let the robots do everything for us. But that story usually ends up pretty bad too. The robots then become second-class citizens, and nobody likes that, and there's going to be some kind of robotism that happens at some point. So we don't know. I mean, in this particular case, I would say it's not fear as much as a concern that we need to think very carefully about what is that going to do for the millions of people who are out of work.
Yeah, robots protesting in the streets.
Yeah.
Right? For basic human rights. And there's another part of this, though. And we always look at, you just touched upon it, but we always look at, robots are going to replace factory workers. Robots are going to replace farms. Robots are going to, replace all the manual labor. What do we do with that? Well, done correctly, robots would replace lawyers and courts and Wall Street and the banking system, doctors, nurses, the medical establishment. It's not just one segment of society. Done effectively, the thinking part of our society would probably be replaced first, right? And that's what we have to have a concern with.
Yeah, I don't think it will be replaced first because we're already seeing that a lot of automation in factories is here. It's already here. But you're completely right. Eventually, everything that we think of as requiring human analytical skills and memory and so on, including professional skills, including in the medical world, a lot of that is going to be replaced.
Look at the stock floor of Wall Street, right, where we used to have all those traders running around with little pieces of paper going nuts.
Yep.
They're not there anymore.
Yeah, you don't need them. Yeah.
You don't need them. You don't need them.
So what's left over are things like intuition and creativity. not everybody wants to do that or is capable of doing that, so that's a problem. It may also be eventually the case that if robots really do gain some kind of conscious awareness, that they'll be a lot better at that than we are.
Painting, writing music.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so who needs humans anymore? So at some point, maybe that's part of our evolution, that you don't need Homo sapiens. We become some Homo cybernetica or something like that.
Yeah, I heard this one researcher, I think it was from Google, talking about AI and said, well, what if we said, okay, AI, listen, we've got to get rid of pollution, right? Go, do it. And that kills humans. Right? They don't know the AI. You just told the AI to stop pollution. Well, it figured out that humans are creating, that we would have to be very aware and set those limits for the task that we want the computer to have. And we have to know when to be able to stop it if it gets out of control.
Right. So one would hope that when we devise an AI that is that intelligent, that you give it that command and it would look at you and say, really? Seriously? That's what you want me to do? In other words, it would be able to see far beyond our limited capacity to understand things, and it would say, no, I don't think I want to do that.
And this is the thing when it comes to AGI, because AGI in its fundamental form is just the average general intelligence of us, and getting to that point. But the moment that AGI is achieved, from that nanosecond forward, it is now learning at a capacity that we don't understand. Right. And every time it chooses to cycle, it is learning at 1,000-year pace.
Yes.
Right, that we obviously we don't live that long, but we couldn't attend college and learn and figure out and theorize and move forward at the capacity of one single AGI computer, let alone a room full of them.
That's right. But see, this, of course, is a favorite science fiction scenario, and maybe that is the evolution. Right? I mean, it's evolving to something which eventually would be a planetary-size intelligence. Maybe that's the way, the direction or the arrow of evolution that the universe is taking.
Well,
it's not bad.
No, yeah,
it's not a bad thing. It's bad for us individually, perhaps, because we won't be needed anymore. But from a long view, maybe okay, well, that's an intelligent planet. That sounds like fun.
Well, this conversation could go on forever. The thing is this, is even if we didn't tell the AGI brain about the internet, right? That would be the danger. An Ethernet cable going in and plugging into the World Wide Web with an AGI capable computer, because that's where all hell would potentially break loose. But even if you didn't provide the knowledge of what the internet is, which is, the knowledge of everything at your fingertips, it would figure it out, right? And it would be in front of you and I, mind-wise, and would be able to outthink us to the point where we would probably volunteer the information and not know it because it is outthinking us. And again, it's not science fiction. It's what would be is what should be expected from an AGI scenario.
Sure. No, it would. Any AGI now is going to be interconnected with others, and with cloud storage and supercomputers and so on. It wouldn't make any sense to make it completely standalone. I mean, maybe with a quantum computer you could do that, but they're not advanced enough at this point.
Thank you so much, Dr. Dean. What a great conversation tonight. I look forward to the next time that you're on the show, and hopefully it'll be when some of this smoke is clearing and we can have more fun. Thank you so much. What a great show.
You're welcome.
Dr. Dean Radin. Again, it's very simple. It is noetic.org. Head over there, click on it. All of his links and his books are over at jimmychurchradio.com. I'm going to take a quick break. When I come back, I'll open up the phone lines and let's have a little conversation. Thank you so much, Dr. Dean Radin, and I will be right back after this short break. Stay with us.
Vivica Fox here, and you are listening to my boy, Jimmy Church, on jimmychurchradio.com.
Despite popular opinion, reading a book will not make you smarter.
But listening to Jimmy Church will.
This is Jimmy Church of Fade to Black, and I take Life Change Tea supplements every single day. It's what I do. Click on their banner at jimmychurchradio.com. When you take the beans from Central America with dashes of Indonesian and African mixed in and then roasted to the dark side of Fade to Black, you create the ultimate brew of fringe. Introducing the Fade to Black blend from Rivermoon Coffee. Yes, Rivermoon's darkest customized roast was created for the love of Fade to Black. The alchemy of masterful roasting and smoking the beans is in every sip of this full-bodied, dark Java. I need my coffee dark, deep, with distinct bittersweet chocolate highlights, just like the bunker. Leaning further into the darkness of the roast is Fade to Black blend from Rivermoon Coffee. Just click on the banner at jimmychurchradio.com and use the promo code F2BBLEND for 15% off of your order today. Go Beckley Teppy.
Hello, my name is Billy Carson, and I am a best-selling author and the founder of ForbiddenKnowledge.tv. Together with my team, we have built an all-new conscious streaming TV platform designed with every family member in mind. If you have ever wanted to travel the world and attend lectures and workshops from your favorite speakers but weren't able to, look no further. ForbiddenKnowledge.tv. There are dozens of workshops and lectures from speakers you know and love. We have also included amazing categories to assure that your consciousness is entertained and elevating on a daily basis. Amazing interviews, ancient history, ascension knowledge, wisdom teachings, documentaries, conspiracies, mysteries, health and fitness, conscious cooking, meditations, finance, yoga, and so much more. To start your free trial on any mobile device or computer, surf to ForbiddenKnowledge.tv. That's Forbidden Knowledge with the number 4, ForbiddenKnowledge.tv. Again, visit ForbiddenKnowledge.tv today.
Are you intrigued by Paranormal Talk Radio? You'll love the new Paranormal Radio app from TalkStream Live. You'll find a great selection of talk shows covering UFOs, ghosts, strange phenomena, and much more. Download the Paranormal Radio app now and start listening to the very best in paranormal talk entertainment, including the network you're listening to right now, the Paranormal Radio app, free in Google Play and the iOS App Store.
It's not a lifestyle we chose. We were born this way. KGRARadio.com.
This is KJCR at JimmyChurchRadio.com.
All right, welcome back. Fade to Black. Thank you, Dr. Dean Radin. Again, his website is noetic.org, and you can go click on it over at jimmychurchradio.com. It's an amazing website. All of the research and things that you can participate in. It's what you would think. It's very deep and complex and a very professional website. So go and check it out, noetic.org. I'm opening up the phone lines right now, 747-228-2730. 2051, 747-228-2051. And a lot to think about tonight. And that this is going back to my original opening statements from tonight, my little rant that I did earlier, which is I need to know why I am thinking and feeling and reacting the way that I am. And I know that the rest of the world, all of you, are dealing with these same very complex issues. And what are causing them? You know, is it from the front end? Is it the media? Is it the internet? Is it instigators that are doing it? Is it something deeper, right, that was going to happen anyway? Is it something in our DNA? Is it my brain? Is it my consciousness? Is it my conscience? Is it my moral compass? What is going on here? One thing is for sure is that my brain and my emotions can only handle so much. And I'm just like the rest of you, where it has been piled on and piled on and piled on for what seems like years. It's been going on for years, these complex. And if you remember, I'll get to the calls here in a second. If you remember some of the conversations I had about these issues going back 4, 5, and 6 years, where I was talking about the headlines every single day and my concern about dealing with one set of news after the other, where in a 24-hour news cycle, the news from one day is the biggest news in the history of man. And then the next day we have even bigger news in the history of everything. And then the next day. And you do that 365 days in a row. How do we deal with this? And I was having this conversation years ago. And this last 6 months, wow, right? And where we are today, it's been too much. It's like information overload. It's trauma overload. It's drama overload. It's too much. It's too much. And at one point, the pot of boiling water is going to have the lid taken off of it. There is no other way to look at it than that. And that's why having Dean Radin on the show to talk about how and why this is going on is just so important. I think it will help us all start to deal with it. I certainly feel a little bit better. Let's see what the news brings by tomorrow morning. But after, and this is the thing. We've been dealing with everything else, and then George Floyd happened, and we saw what went on across this country and continues to, and for good reason. It shouldn't stop. But on the heels of all of that, then we have Rayshard Brooks and what happened Friday in Atlanta. I'm gobsmacked. I'm gobsmacked. And going through that today and that press conference today is if I'm at that point, and I know that a lot of you look to me to be stable and a guide, and I appreciate that, and that's fine. But even for me today, I'm like, man, I think I'm at that point. Right? I can't, man, I'm already dealing with everything else. You know, and I still have family. I've got Rita and kids and dogs to take care of, and family and parents and all the other issues that are going on that happen every single day in life. And trying to emotionally get through all of that and then everything else. It's just incredible. It's incredible. But we'll get through it. With that, let's go to the phones. Hi, you're live on Fade to Black. Who's calling?
Hi, Jimmy. It's Deb.
Hi, Deb.
Hi. I can totally relate to what you're speaking about. I was on Twitter today for a bit, and right off the bat, they like to post these videos, and I didn't see, what you saw about the hearing with the new gentleman that was shot in the back and killed. I missed that stuff. But I saw a video where a black guy was walking down the street, and there was an old woman with a walker, and he hit her in the head, and she fell onto the ground and hit her head on a fire hydrant. And he just kept walking. He did it deliberately. It looked like, again, you can't believe everything you see.
I don't think. Let me stop you there. I don't think he was black.
Okay, he looked black to me.
See?
Okay, but
yeah, right. No, that's what the media does, and.
Well, no matter what color he was, that's beside the point.
Okay.
Any human being who strikes an old woman in the head and she falls on the concrete and strikes her head on a fire hydrant, and he keeps, so I don't care if he's purple, that's not the point.
Right.
The point is that infuriated me. And the guy that posted it was called...
he's arrested, right? They caught him.
Yeah, and he had supposedly had 100 prior arrests.
That's right.
Is what the thing said. Okay, so you did see it. You know exactly what I'm talking about.
I followed that whole story. Yes.
Yeah, and so I commented, and I cursed in my comment because it absolutely infuriated me. And then the guy that posted it said, I agree, but profanity is not needed. And then I tweeted back and I said, I agree. I said, I think I need to take a time out and meditate and pray. And then I logged off of Twitter because he totally made his point in a gentle way. It's like, stop looking at this stuff because it's enraging me. I can't do anything about it except in November. And, and be kind to people every day. But it really does rile you up. And I think they're overloading us with this stuff on purpose, because they want to generate a lot of negative energy for whatever reason. And I don't like feeling controlled, and it feels like a control mechanism, and I don't like it.
Yeah, and there's we can be aware of the media. I mean, how many times have I said over the years that I stopped watching the news and I don't feel sick anymore? My body doesn't go through trauma every time I see an ISIS beheading video. And, I stopped doing it, and I'm a better person of it, right? All of those warnings and the things that I say personally don't even apply with today now. Right? Because you can't.
You get sucked back into it.
Well, and plus you have to be aware of what is going on in the news right now. You don't have a choice. You have to stay up on top of it. When I've got protests and riots and looting going on around my home.
Out of cars in Santa Monica today. That was another thing I saw, and immediately I thought of you. I thought, I wonder how close that is to you guys.
Right.
Did you see that?
Yes. Yeah. And so, I am forced into it. I need to know what's going on, and it is not healthy for any of us. And there's something else. Speaking with Dean, I know that we are all connected. All of our brains are connected. The universe is connected. Everything is entangled. The reaction of these are proven facts of physics today. It's just the way that it is. And we are now more aware of that than ever before. But that being said, when you see the reactions of things going on across the United States, where we would like to say that this is an American thing and an American phenomenon, and you see statues being thrown into rivers in Europe and protest in Asia and all around the world because of it says to me that there is something that the media and the controllers and state governments that don't understand. And I truly believe that it's the masses that control this planet. And you cannot continue to try to control the masses through the media like they have done before. It's always been effective in years past, but it's not that kind of party today. And there is something that has been activated. There's something there that has been activated. And governments don't understand it. Nobody Not Putin, not Trump, not anybody from China or Central or South America. No, they don't get it. They're trying to control it and trying to ignore it even. You can't.
Mm-hmm.
You can't. It's out of your control.
What do you define the something as?
What's that?
You said something's been activated. What do you define that something as?
And that was my point with Dr. Radin tonight. I don't know what that is. There is probably, and he mentioned this, that there is something in our DNA, something down there that has been there forever. It's been there forever. And we don't know anything about that. But you keep doing what you're doing, and that is not only through the media, but the actions of state and local and national governments and the leaders of those governments. I'm talking here in the United States and around the world. You keep manipulating and screwing with the public, and it's eventually going to backfire. And maybe that is what we are seeing here and now. That real change is needed. So there you go. Listen, Deb, thank you so much. We're at the end of the show. Have a great night. I got a couple more calls I got to get in. We'll see you tomorrow right here.
Real quick question. Is Dino still around? Your old fate or not? Is he still around?
Who?
Dino.
He
called the night on that Douglas Dietrich call. He was an old fader, not Dino, and he was on the call with you that night.
Okay,
Is he still around?
I haven't heard, seen, or anything from him in 5-6 years.
Okay, go back, please. Happy Jimmy.
I'll talk to you, Deb. Thank you so much.
Back tomorrow. Bye.
Right on. And there you go. Let's see who we have up next. Hi, you're live on Fade to Black. Who's calling?
Hello, Jimmy. Joe Rich from Staten Island.
Hi, Joe. How are you?
I'm good. I'm so glad. I know we don't have a lot of time, but I'm so glad you made that comment in your monologue about just not feeling right, like all of a sudden at times. Did I hear correctly?
Yeah, that's right.
I think you got it too, and a lot of us are feeling that, Jimmy. And I relate to it totally. You could be ripping along, doing 12 things at once, figuring out all kinds of stuff and feel like you're on top of the world for a bit. And then eventually, sometimes, you feel like somebody took a straw and sucked the life and energy right out of you, and you feel drained, and you just have to sit down and you just want to freaking collapse.
Well, it's because we all want to at least have the feeling of some kind of control in your life, right? You've got control of your bank account, the bills are paid. You're not late on your car payment. You've been getting up and going to work on time. Whatever, your kids are doing good in school. Your wife and your relationship or your husband, things are cool and your whatever it is, right? Your dogs are actually behaving. Where you've got things in control. Right now, today, that feeling has been taken away, where you don't know what the future is with your job or your home or your house or your kids going back to school. There are all of these things, your relationships with your friends and racism and culture and things are suddenly completely out of your control. Completely, 100% out of your control. And I don't like that feeling, and I don't think anybody else does. And somehow we've got to get that back. You know what's strange, Joe, and thank you for pointing that out. If we go back to New Year's Eve, December 31st, 2019, right before 2020, how excited we were. 2020, this is the year. It's the right number, 2020. And there was nothing but bliss in front of us. What a great year.
It's going to be a new world in 2020. It's January 1st, Jimmy. I know. I felt the same way.
And that sense of wonderment and well-being and in control and knowing our destiny and everything that we felt. I was in Las Vegas for New Year's Eve. I watched the fireworks from the top of a hotel. And what a great weekend. And the feeling, right? The feeling and how quickly that sense of control and destiny has been stripped from me and the rest of the planet. I don't think any of us are cool with it right now. And I don't know. Jimmy, I don't know when it's going to come back. I just don't know.
Let me make a quick comment. Hello?
Mm-hmm.
Hello?
Mm-hmm.
What if it's like just one really big, gigantic psyop, like your friend Del said last week or a few days ago?
Say that again.
What if it's a mass? Sometimes, being a virus, granted, there's a bug going around, so to speak. But what if it's a massive illusion being perpetrated for some so-called ulterior motive, and you can pick any conspiracy theory you want on top of that?
I don't think those players that would attempt something like that you're referring to are that smart. No.
What if it was an interdimensional being assisted type smart?
I
don't know. I'm just saying.
I know.
It's something real fishy. That's all I'm saying.
If as fishy as I want to get my mind to go, I kind of shrug that off with a grin. I just don't see it. I just don't. I don't. Now, that being said, Joe, I would have never thought that we would be dealing with what we're dealing with today. That also was at the farthest part of anybody's imagination. We didn't see it. And so certainly this happened. And like I said earlier tonight, this is part of our reality. This is real. This isn't a movie. This isn't George Orwell's 1994 being talked about on some conspiracy show in 1995. That's not what this is. This is our reality today. And it's very tough. But I don't see it. I don't see it going full tilt nightmare. No.
Let me give you a positive aspect, Jimmy. That maybe it's not necessarily a malicious thing. Like I guess Laurie Spagna said something about maybe. Listen, here's a positive aspect in my world, in Joe's world here. There's many people that are totally stressed out, fearful, and confused. But at the same point, for me, I'm a bit of a spiritual type person, so I got my own thing. Maybe one of these days we'll really have a good talk about it. But I look at it in a way, it's a sense of a newness, like a new world, and even though there's these struggles and trials to overcome, there's a freshness.
I think that's the point. Joe, thank you for the phone call. I think that's the point. You have a great night. Be safe out there in Staten Island, and I'll see you tomorrow night right here on the show.
You got it, brother. Take care.
Thank you, Joe. I've totally, and my view of the world will never change. I walk around with flowers hanging out of my pockets. I do. It's just not going to change. Not going to change. They're trying. They're not going to get me. Fade to Black's executive producer is Rita Camarion. Show is produced by Hill J. Palm, Renee, Dennis, and Kevin. Announcers are Steve Harder, Gene Vito, and Mark D. Kovar. Webmaster Drew the Geek. Music Doug Aldrich. Intro Spaceboy, spaceboymusic.com. Fade to Black is produced by KJCR for the Game Changer Network, and syndication is KGRA, The Planet. This broadcast owned and copyrighted 2020 by Fade to Black and the Game Changer Network, Inc. It cannot be rebroadcast, downloaded, copied, or used anywhere in the known universe without written permission from Fade to Black or the Game Changer Network. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Tomorrow night, right here, Fader Night. Open lines all night long. Very special thanks to Dr. Dean Radin. I'll see everybody tomorrow. Until then, be safe. Go Beckley Tepe.